The hero says he's tired of something. He stresses that only he can do some of these tasks, and that they help others. Looking back, the hero considers the duties he had to carry out. Starting today, the young man will act differently. He says if he needed an excuse for being late, it would be that he overslept. The hero admits he either overslept or failed. The young man notices his tears won't stop. Vowing not to attend the meeting, he says he will boycott. X reports feeling better after a longer sleep last night and prefers not to go anywhere. The girl greets X and hopes he will do his best today. The heroine says the guildmaster wanted to speak with him and asks him to wait a moment. The guildmaster reacts with disbelief when he discovers the hero is an inept wizard who cannot even cast basic spells, and asks why the hero left without permission and missed the meeting. The master says the hero is not ready yet to become an adventurer. A man reads the hero's personal data card. Rank E. Nickname Magician. Clumsy. Age 19. Height 160 centimeters. Weight 45 kilograms. Specialty increasing the duration of spell effects. He says he will be punished by being placed in the lowest rank, F. The hero finds it absurd that his rank is being cut by 3 levels. X points out that if he drips blood onto the card, he will be registered. The master says he must hurry to drip his blood onto the card to undo all his work, then asks the hero why he is just standing there instead of acting. X admits he can't tolerate the situation anymore and needs to make a decision. The hero admits he may not be cut out to be an adventurer and thanks everyone for their help. The master doesn't understand why X wants to leave and yells at the hero. X says this is the first time he's seen that expression on the master's face and that he doesn't care. Pans, the leader of the strongest zombie clan, is glad X is leaving because it will raise the bar for joining the Adventurers Guild, and he remembers being in a guild with someone who could only use the weakest magic. The girl asks the hero to stop, saying he still has things to do. X says he has already left the guild. The young man adds that he may be the only one here who can cry, although he is not sure, and says he already cried everything yesterday, so it is better not to continue. Pans says the hero now has the nerve to behave that badly. X notes none of them understood anything. He points out that solo missions pay 50% more, so you can earn more doing them, but they're not for him. The girl says these taxes come from the feudal lord, the guardian of the forest, and the guild's former master. The hero agrees and asks her to read the contents and the reward amount aloud. She realizes these 3 tasks are difficult, and no one wants to do them. Fix the magic item of the feudal lord's maid, patrol and protect the forest for the forest guard, and maintain and manage the tavern for a month for the former guildmaster. The girl says the reward for the tasks will be 7 small silver coins. Pants notes he must accept the offers even if he cannot fulfill them. Axe calls that the price of his lunch. Receiving such orders feels humiliating to Pants. The hero realizes the reward is worthless. As an E-rank adventurer, it does not match his rank. X adds that these 3 tasks will be his last, and that once he finishes them, he will stop being an adventurer. The hero casts the ice ball spell to start repairing the feudal lord's servant's item, and he says the magical renewal is complete. X notices their paycheck is gone and assumes the light will work for about a month, so they keep working, casting lighting magic in all the rooms. X says the place is very big and there is a lot to do, and he admits he's very tired from work. The hero also considers how to handle the materials needed to build a portable wind and ice ball, and how to use a well-tuned turbine to spin it. The young man finishes the job satisfied, and then notices a strange feeling in his chest. X said he had a bad feeling that came true. Viscount Radley says 100 of these jars need to be made. The hero apologizes, but refuses the offer. The Viscount insults the young man, calling him a defective magician. The hero says he will stop because the demands of the past 5 years were unreasonable and leave him unable to imagine sleeping. The hero insists he will not change his mind. Radley says if he is not satisfied with the explanation, he will order the hero executed. The Viscount demands a proper apology, believing his threats will sway the hero. X says he no longer wants to work here. The hero celebrates his success. X, seeing the Viscount looking worried, asks if he is okay. The Viscount, disappointed, calls the hero a talentless wizard who only uses basic magic and demands the hero bring in more profit than last time. Radley says this should have been handled from the start. The hero suggests asking someone else and replies that he is already retired. X confirms that the Viscount's request has been fulfilled and says he is no longer here. The hero says he feels uneasy about personal requests, calling them too draining for him, and notices his old forest guard companions no longer come here because they have handed their responsibilities to others. X says he's worked at this for 5 years, and the hero explains that collecting magic stones is getting harder because more and more extra tasks keep appearing. X casts a fireball at the Orc King, saying the Orc King found him, but he was faster. The hero suggests the Orc King believed the fireballs posed no threat. The young man declares his flame will never go out and highlights the unusual, long-lasting nature of his magical abilities. The hero says he's getting stronger, but someone has disturbed him. A shadow wolf bites X, and he reels in shock, realizing he let his guard down. Using a stun spell, the hero pushes back a dark figure that attacks him. The wolf flees, but the hero notices she managed to bite him badly. The hero admits the wolf could still inflict serious harm and knows he did not fully defeat the enemy, but struck him with lightning. Noting that the mana potion makes him hungry for a big meal, the hero shows today's report, which says 1 Orc King, 8 Shadow Wolves, 15 Orcs, and 2 Goblins were defeated, and 1 recovery potion and 7 mana potions were used. X says the monster population has dropped a lot recently, so they no longer need an administrator. The young man thanks them for their help over the past 5 years. He says that being finally able to sleep in his own bed matters more than the greatly reduced number of monsters. X is glad he can relax now. Noticing a bite and torn pants, he considers his next move. X tries to mend his pants with a lucky needle, but the repair fails and the situation gets even worse. The hero decides to cut off his damaged trousers and get new ones as soon as he can. The guildmaster asks X one last time to run the tavern and look after the premises for a month. A man tells the hero to start work before the guild opens, and the former guildmaster is a frail old man who still believes he has influence. The hero casts magic spells like Fireball, Ice Ball, and Water Pillar to keep the house clean. X says they're tired from using elemental magic all day, especially from casting extension spells. The man asks the hero why he was late today. He says he won't find him and there will be no commission either. X agrees, and the guildmaster laughs, telling him not to be late next month. The hero celebrates and says that failure is wonderful. X says, relieved, that he won't have to redo everything. The guildmaster tells him to record the violation in the report, since it was the hero's mistake. The hero says he has completed 3 assignments. The girl confirms the task is complete. X thanks her for her help. The hero's chains are now broken. The hero leaves the building happily and announces that the work is finished. X says being an adventurer sucks and feels like fucking slavery. X is free now, and his carefree life begins. The hero basks in a beautiful morning. X says he's been thinking about this for a long time, and now he has the time and money to pursue his plans. The young man enjoys his freedom. He gives his name as X, and the hero introduces himself as a wizard who can only use elemental magic. The hero describes his unique powers, like a fire that never goes out and ice that stays frozen for an entire month. He says his magic lasts longer. X realizes he still has money since he hasn't shopped yet and notices a pleasant smell. The young man happily points to the counter of skewers. For the first time in his life, he treats himself to something tasty and is satisfied that he will now get to eat it. Viscount Roderick stresses the hero may use only elemental magic and is displeased the hero refused him. The young man confirms the Viscount is correct and agrees with his opinion. Roderick asks the simpleton's name. The servant Ismond says it's Axe. The Viscount orders that this man be kept on his estates and asks that no one hire him, and Ismond says this will be arranged immediately. The man says he can't wait for the day this man begs him for a job. The Viscount admits he must learn humility this time, and says he has already given instructions about aches. The servant asks what the device in front of him is. Roderick notes the mage has fashioned a small device from ice and wind magic. The man is surprised that the cold air and ice produce an effect beyond what he would expect from a novice. Ismond chose this device with a keen eye, and the Viscount recommends using it in the kitchen. He says he had planned to make about 200, but the incompetent man ran away. The Viscount asks what is wrong and about the kitchen. Ismond notices the tank's water supply has stopped, and the man says the same magician made it all, so it is no surprise there is no water. He suggests calling another wizard or using a grimoire if it's cheaper, and Ismond agrees it will still be better than what Axe could have done. The hero savors the delicious dish. clearly showing pleasure and joy. The young man says he can't remember the last time he tasted something so delicious and is glad he quit his old job. The hero wants more food but knows overeating will cause a stomachache. After many years of hard work, he notices his body has become weaker. Axe says he didn't expect one bite to fill him, and someone asks if he'll keep eating. The hero offers some shashlik to the boy with ears. X hands food to the boy while pointing at it. He also says he needs to eat slowly to avoid upsetting his stomach. The boy thanks the hero and says he has not eaten meat in 6 months. X notes that as an orphan he knows the value of luxuries like meat, and the hero promises to treat the other person to something when they meet again. He says life without work is enjoyable, though not fully satisfying, and he will live as he wants. The young man keeps thinking about the future and says he needs nothing but plans to spend money on himself. The world has changed so much it makes him dizzy. He is determined to spend his money even though he has not bought anything yet. X needs help in healing. A colleague offers him a stress relief pillow and points out its comfortable shape. The hero beams with delight while holding a soft pillow. The young man enjoys the pillow's softness. The hero says he will take her home and won't let go of the pillow because he is so happy. The girl asks the hero if he really is him. The girl says it really is him, and X explains he just decided to look at the pillow. A woman talks about her daughter, saying the girl will be happy if she has an admirer. X clarifies he was only checking the quality. The hero says he touched the item and got it dirty, so we'll have to buy it back. According to the woman, this is a sample and cannot be purchased. She offers a possible solution. X thanks him for the decision but declines, and the girl admires the hero, calling him cute. The girl asks the hero to help her clean a barrel of water, saying her request was not even considered by the guild. The hero feels overwhelmed by people making unreasonable requests and can no longer accept them. He notices that although she likes sarcasm, she knows her limits. She thanks him for listening to her request. The woman asks that the application form be sent to the guild later. The hero confirms he has decided to give up adventuring and stop working. At the Viscount's residence, Aesmond stands and studies the jug. Iceman sees the broken jug and asks why it happened, saying he used magic as instructed. The A-class wizard says when he asked to repeat the process, everything went fine, adding he only meant to fix the barrel with the ball, not break it. And he is surprised that such magic does not exist. Aesmond admits he never expected Axe's magic to be so remarkable, and now he can't imagine his life without the handy jug. He offers to bring another barrel of water so they can rest. The hero agrees and calls it a great idea. A servant notices the light go out and assumes it was X's doing. Now the butler's torment begins. The hero gives a firm refusal. Still cheerful, the woman asked for something. X gathered his courage and refused. The girl offers a slime pillow as a thank you despite having money. The hero says it costs 5 silver coins and thinks it's expensive. A devilish creature and an angelic one argue about whether the hero should work. The angelic creature says the work will take only 5 minutes and he will get a free pillow, while the other says there is no need to work at all. The girl offers the hero use of the bath and insists he agree. The product is very popular and in high demand, she adds. X feels he must agree, otherwise the product will be taken away. X really wants this pillow and says it's not a job, just a friendly favor. The young man finally agrees. The aunt says the hero is cute and asks if he truly wants to be her son-in-law. She says her daughter loves the hero too. X is glad the girl is happy and notices the slime pillow now belongs to him. The hero casts the fireball spell. The girl is surprised to learn the term can be 1 year and asks whether it could last longer. X wonders why he was taught that way and admits he couldn't do that again. Auntie says someone came. Smiling, the girl greets the hero and calls him brother. Auntie says X-kun made it possible for them to use the bathroom and thanks him for it. Lena says she loves X. X tells the girl she must not say such things again until she grows up. Lena says she is already old enough. The hero fears that saying this in public could get her eaten by orcs. The girl says that if he no longer wants to be an adventurer, she offers him a job working for his aunt using his magic. The hero declares firmly that he has decided not to work. Anna apologizes to him and says she understood him. The girl says she won't offer something like that again. Lena rushes over and hugs them too, telling the young man not to worry. X notices how they warm his heart, thanks them both for their help, and says he is okay now. The young man thanks them for the day. The aunt says they are always ready to help, and the girl reminds the hero he can turn to his friends if he has problems. The boy asks his aunt if she knows about the ice ball, and she says nobles use it. X says it's a ball that won't melt for a year. The young man offers the ball as a bonus. The girls show admiration and pride. Thoughtfully, the girl asks why no one comes to her. That a person is X. The hero, disappointed, says sleeping has become twice as pleasant. The pillow has greatly improved his sleep, letting him rest for more than 3 hours a day. He is glad he left the adventure guild, but he is hungry. The girl with ears greets the hero happily. A ready-made slime food worth 10 silver coins sits on the table and is harmful. The girl insists the hero should pay for her. X is surprised by the offer. The waitress is stunned when she realizes the hero will eat here. She realizes X finally wants to eat at a restaurant. The girl shows him the menu and the hero agrees, promising to call her if he likes anything. The hero asks for a recommendation on what to order from the menu. A waiter announces the daily special and says the hero's order is waiting. X likes food. The girl feels the hero's warmth and sees his eyes fill with happy tears. The waitress says X feels warm and his eyes begin to water. Another character agrees, adding that that's what he thinks. The hero realizes the food appears ordinary, but the mix of acid and mana is perfect. X is glad to be able to refuse bad food and is grateful for it. The hero says the food was delicious. The girl, concerned, asks if he has any free time and reminds him she is his little sister. X says he's quit. She offers to team up now that he has quit. The young man says he no longer wants to work. He also says he wants to take a walk to clear his head before going home. The hero admits he cannot stand because of the pain. Another girl asks the hero what is going on and what happened. X notices she smells delicious. The girl asks the hero if he's all right. The young man apologizes that his buff spell wore off again, saying this happens often. He also says he activates elemental magic and boosts it as support 1. The hero explains his original doping magic increases strength, health, agility, intelligence, MP, and AP by 1. She asks if he has recovered and says that working as a doctor has left her exhausted. The girl admits she worried too much about the hero and asks for forgiveness. To thank her for saving her, X offers to cast a spell on her that will keep her from getting tired for a month. The girl thinks of X. She asks who he is and what ability he has, then is surprised to learn the hero can only use basic beginner magic, and the heroine happily says she can do everything now. The girl ran off to finish her business, and X says he used support 1 only on members of his guild, but the girl didn't hear that it would only keep her from getting tired for a month. The group is the guild's most powerful, and Pans mentions that bonus time is great, while another mage says being an adventurer requires wisdom. The girl looks with interest at the object through the magnifying glass the magician brought her. The girl, rejoicing at their success, calls them magnificent this month and says with admiration that they defeated the Orc King, the Cannibal, the Shadow Wolf, and other monsters. The girl asks how they defeated the monsters. Pans replies mysteriously that it is a secret. The hero says they are just taking a magic stone from a demon one of the foresters killed, and adds that it's all thanks to an unknown, incredibly strong man. Pan offers everyone a drink to celebrate a successful month, but the other magician says he's tired, thanks Pan, and declines, and the hero asks why he is feeling ill as well. He says he's been feeling tired too and hasn't felt invincible lately. Another character agrees the hero is right. The hero decides they need that wizard and says so. The girl is asked to say a few words. The man tells the girl that X must be brought back and his rank must be upgraded. The man says X was buffing the heroes and mentions they could just rest because they are the strongest adventurers. Noting they need X to continue their activities, the hero says this was meant to be the group's final glorious day. The hero says he's full after a good walk and will rest in his room now, but it's very noisy outside the hotel. The young man says he does not want trouble, so he moves elsewhere. Someone asks if the little girl has a live bear. The girl hugs a stuffed bear that is actually Ryuka. Ryuka says X is late. She says she came to see him but couldn't enter the inn because people were staring at her, and he thinks she couldn't stand it any longer and hid there. X notices the girl seems shy and wonders how long she has been here. At the Quiet Cat Cafe, Ryuka asks why the hero broke the magic contract, says they'll be in real trouble without him, and runs a sewing factory staffed by living dolls. The hero admits he quit his job and apologizes. She asks whether he is really leaving, and Ryuka is surprised to learn the hero has no plans to leave the city. Rika supports the hero's decision. The bear apologizes for hitting the hero earlier and thanks him for his help, calling him a friend. The talking bear has been boosting the buff for a long time, but when it wears off, he loses that power, and the girl thanks the hero. Ryuka says that without a hero, the mad bear loses his wits. The bear also makes it clear he is counting on the hero. The hero explains to the girl that he was dismissed from the guild. X says Ryuka was very upset with him. He notices she seems like a different person. The hero adds that Ryukai even promised to bring him back to his senses. Her ex asks her to forgive him and offers to walk her home. Admiring Ryuki's appearance, he compares her to a doll. The girl greets the hero happily. X and Ryuka stand beside each other, appearing confused. He sees two beautiful girls in the hero's room in broad daylight. The girl brings good news, saying he was approved for C rank, and they promise another B rank next month. The hero says he's no longer an adventurer and points out he was F class. The girl explains that the guild set trials for the hero so he could overcome his adversity. She says there will be high stakes, and that from now on the guild will reject requests from the poor, adding that they will focus on high-stakes requests. She shows joy at his presence in the guild and suggests the hero ask her out, but he says he doesn't have time. X looks at Ryuku and realizes everything is fine. The hero says he has changed and wants to say something important. The talking bear says the young man will not listen to the girl no matter what she says. X realizes the bear said what he wanted to say, and the girl says his stuffed animal has spoken. The magic bear says the searing begins with mages because they are so rare, and that the guild takes commission payments from its partners to cover its own expenses. The hero asks in surprise whether this is true, finding it hard to believe he is being taught by a bear with an intelligence of +1. The bear says the guild must first apologize for its behavior. The hero says he's finally home. Ryuka reminds him to thank the crazy bear. X thanks him for his help. The bear says he can be called Kumakichi. The boy asks Ryuku whether she really told Kumakichi about the guild's work. This calms him. The hero thanks the girl for covering for him. At the restaurant, the boy tells Kumakichi, Lena, and Lena's aunt that Ryuku was one of his many good friends. The girl explains why the hero turned down the offer. She reports many failed missions and that no guild members have shown up. Stunned, the hero can't make sense of what's happening. The guild's doomsday is almost here. X also points out that Kumakichi is soft and fluffy. The hero says he's tired of constantly clashing with the administrators. He asks how Ryuki runs the workshop. The sewing workshop's efficiency varies greatly with and without automatic dolls, he adds. And the hero says he was worried Ryuka might not deliver on time. X can't figure out why Ryuki looks like that. The girl agrees, saying she's heard of this before, and that making them work would cast her as a villain. The girl says her bear is completely different, and Kumakichi asks X not to leave him. Rika says she knows how valuable X is, but the workshop can only cope if they cut production, adding that the world will survive without him, so there is no need to take responsibility for yourself. She suggests he rest a bit. The hero agrees and thanks her. Realizing he has understood everything, the girl says she is leaving now. The hero thanks her and walks her home. Another woman apologizes and explains that Mr. X resigned a few days ago. The former guildmaster is surprised to learn how the young man quit and is the last to know. The hero complains that another man ruined all the delicious dishes in his restaurant after all the trouble the hero has caused him, and that man wonders whether the hero will blame him for his dismissal. He says if anything serious happens, he'll take full responsibility to the end and tells them to reread the documents, and the girl reminds them the former guildmaster knows his business. The girl reads the document while the man asks her what happened. She explains the application was treated as a rejected request, so the hero is no longer valid and the guild has nothing to do with it. The former guildmaster says this is absurd. The man wonders who will take Axis's place after he is fired, and notes they have just gone into debt, while the girl thanks the hero for his hard work. After the mission, the heroes return and the girl realizes they failed. A man sounds surprised and calls the situation strange. The hero says the enemy is stronger than usual, so this is harder than it was a few days ago. The girl says this is already the 9th failure this month. There were so many last year, and now 9 in just 3 days. People who have never experienced failure talk about a strong enemy. The guildmaster asks the heroes what's wrong after they lose ground. The hero requests a special meeting and explains he has been feeling unwell lately. The zombie team are the guild's strongest adventurers, and the hero announces that today is a special day, and will reprimand all the adventurers. The man believes once people try it, they will be hooked. The guildmaster asks adventurers to stay highly aware and think for themselves every day. The guildmaster tells the adventurers to gather their gear and set out on an adventure. They thank him for his words. After an emergency meeting in the tavern, the secret is revealed and the hero happily declares that A will strengthen him. The girl notes that enhancing without a fight is pointless and adds that someone already knew it worked. The mage tells the newbie not to think and just follow orders. The girl says everyone should line up so she can give them the buffs they want. She asks Mara, who had 15 magical abilities. Mara thanks the girl for her help. The girl notes that Mara is a powerful sorceress who casts several potent elemental spells while using little mana. Another character greets everyone and says he needs a boost too. Eyes adds that it is hard work. To their surprise, the hero notices their buffs have already expired. The girl reacts with surprise and asks what is happening. Someone reproaches her for being a weak sorceress. Eyes says the buff lasts only 10 minutes. The mage says X had enough buffs to last a month. Mara admits she struggles without enhancement magic. The girl says that without buffs, her magic falls to a child's level, so she must restore it with potions. Without the enhancement, they cannot do their job as before. Eyes is certain this is impossible. She has specialized in magic her whole life. The enhancements last for a maximum of 10 minutes. The girl says she is disappointed that they can no longer return to the previous level. Another girl suggests calling a different buff master and reminds the heroes the buffs only last 10 minutes. The hero considers whether X could truly be amazing. Mara says they need X, that he was kicked out, and hopes they can bring him back. He agrees this is the right course of action. The girl says the guy who was with him said they should apologize. The guildmaster asks who he should apologize to. The girl commands the heroes to go apologize to X. The hero recognizes the same empowered wizard mentioned earlier. Auntie says she needs to sharpen her knives. It will only take about 10 grand, and she won't take any assignments that cost more than that. The young man says he used to have a set percentage of orders, but now he refuses them all. He believes the world can go on without him. The girl asks the hero what he is doing there and calls him a defective magician. The hero spots Team 1B, the city's signature team. Pan reminds X to be more polite to his former colleagues. He meets the hero's challenging gaze. X admits he may have been somewhat emotionless before and cannot respond to this remark. The young man asks the PANs to apologize. Pans doesn't know what they want from him, and X insists he apologize. Pan asks whether the hero is in his right mind and threatens to chop him up. X says drawing a sword and threatening with magic is an adventurer's way, and he casts the ice charm spell. Pan jokes that if X gets cheeky, he'll cut him into pieces, then is surprised by X's actions and asks what he did. The magician winces in pain, notices the sword has been stuck for a month, and then asks why it is frozen. The third character admits he's drawn to crime and says that, for a novice wizard, that's a lot of money. X says Pan attacked him, that he tried not to hurt him, and that he had to go far before they retreated. Expressing concern, he says that if he tries any harder, something will happen. Sister arrives with the other heroes and points out that 3 against 1 is unfair. He realizes this is the first time he's seen the manager. The manager, surprised, recognizes the hero's voice, and the waitress smiles happily. The manager calls Pans a coward and asks if he just wants to hide, saying you must act before you talk. The hero reminds them to pay last month's bill, which was 3 days overdue. Pan says he can avoid punishment by making the manager his enemy. The girl says the two of them are better than most adventurers. The hero is pleased to find the knives are even sharper after being reinforced. One character reacts with shock and fury, threatening to tear the mages apart. The heroes declare they are ready for battle. Pans replies that the jokes should not be taken seriously. The hero asks for more time and promises to pay later. Extamans demands that the hero apologize to him. X is stunned, wondering how this happened, and remarks that they got what they deserved. Other characters praise the hero. X thanks them both for their help. The manager hopes the hero will visit them today. The girl says she'll be happy about that. The waitress asks what to cook for him. X suggests they make a special dish called hanji. He says it will all be over if this little magician interferes with them. Pan says they will need to take a few more people and beat them up. The girl happily announces they have finally received the report on the forest guard's murder, and the hero rejoices. The group stands in the devil's forest and is startled when they see something strange. He asks what is happening, and Pan notices the magic stone is missing from the ground. The young man is surprised to learn the demon is still alive. Filled with regret, the hero asks for help and then disappears. The forester's report was false, and until now only X had handled the case while others took credit. But those others cannot handle the task. As a result, the demons remained unharmed, and the extra time they had counted on was lost. X was forbidden to pick up the demon's magic stones. The newcomers didn't know this. Elfman was a traitor. After that day, the guild's young heroes, the zombie, were disgraced. The hero is disappointed because he lost his wallet. The man offers the hero an option involving a customer who refuses the service, and Pans declines. Pan says the shop will still value the sword even if it is unused, and they will give him the money he needs. He also asks about 1 gold coin, and the hero firmly forbids touching the sword, saying he will return for it in a month. The hero confirms he will return the sword during next month's bonus time. Pans wonders why you had to get such a big bill at the restaurant, especially if the bonus never comes. The hero did not come back that day. Noticing he is in a great mood, the butler asks the Viscount if anything good happened at the ball. The Viscount says the device produces a cool breeze. The young man recalls the tube holding ice and wind magic that an incompetent mage gave him. Bradley notes the princess was very interested in the gift, which will boost his reputation. The hero concedes one problem: X is no longer an adventure. The Viscount suggests visiting X at home and says the unemployed, impoverished, and incompetent magician would welcome the chance to work for him. The butler agrees, says it's a good idea, and will do it. The hero says his first task was to make 200 identical pipes. The Viscount notes he can see the hero has learned from him. The young man thanks the Viscount for his help. The hero realizes that only X can restore the extinguished magical light and says his head hurts, even though he finished the task. The butler asks the maid what is wrong. She tells him the ice in the largest compartment, number 7, has begun to melt and asks for fresh ice when it is ready. The hero suggests destroying the contents of ice compartment 7, but the others object as wasteful and suggest calling a repairman to replace it instead. The butler observed that Axis magic was unique, and no one else could recreate the jugs that kept leaking water. The maid says she did not realize how strong X was, and the hero explains that X uses basic magic, though its effects last much longer than usual. X moves quickly to protect the family's prestige, and the butler agrees to handle it, offering X a large sum of money and a seat at the table. X looks at the mailbox that has a stuffed toy inside. X announces he will now pull out the rabbit soldier and that there is nothing surprising about it. Ryuka's house is full of stuffed bunnies from the sewing shop, he says. The hero notices they all look identical, but Ryuka can tell them apart. X notices she said she could do without his help and senses something is off. The hero decides to go to Ryuki's workshop. The boy uses the key Ryu was able to give him to enter her workshop. X opens the door and apologizes for disturbing him. The hero notices Ryuka is a mage like himself. The hero explains that magic is irrational and comes from the land of eternal emptiness. Each kind has its own zone. The plains always have fire. The icy valley has a different kind of cold, and magic links our world to that land, showing what is normal for its inhabitants. The mage uses a magical element in his body to open a tunnel between our world and the void, and makes a pact with a void inhabitant to have a hole opened in his body. Such forces are inherently inconsistent with what is desired. Ryuka was a gifted puppeteer, but when the void took everything from her, she ended up alone, and she sacrificed her ability to connect with others by developing an interpersonal phobia. The hero notices this man has become Ryuki's friend, but is jealous, sapping her courage so others cannot get close. X says they became friends the day he first heard Ryuki's voice. A small rabbit-like animal stands at the door holding a ball of yarn. The hero sees the animal has fallen because it was walking with threads attached. Ryuka helps the animal and it keeps moving. She asks to wait while watching what is happening. X greets Ryuku and says he's here to play. The girl is relieved the hero came, but says he should have at least rung the bell. X remembers ringing the bell, but she did not hear it. The hero asks Ryuku why she is so worried. Ryuka says nothing special happened, asks to wait, and turns to X. A small rabbit lay buried under the fallen debris. The hero looks at Ryuku, and she agrees, embarrassed. Ryuka admits she was afraid to ask him for something, and the girl asks if the hero is happy. The hero says he's only been here a few minutes and the rabbits are already falling apart, apologizing and admitting he didn't realize how bad it would be once the +1 intelligence was gone. X is happy to see that the rabbit has gotten out. Ryuka thanks X for his help. The girl says they can stop here. The hero admits he is starting to feel heroic in this situation. The girl looks surprised and X says everything is fine and she can go through it in order. The hero says only he can help them and urges them to rely on him. The little animal actively uses the boost, repeating the word boost. X points at the last door until everyone listens to him. The room has many small animals. The hero objects, saying he does not want to work here. He says they're all here and he doesn't have a choice. The girl wraps her arms around the hero from behind. The hero laughs and says he has no idea when she'll calm down. X asks Ryuka what she's doing. She reminds the hero he heard her words and says the dolls become uncontrollable if they don't do hard work. The heroine suggests he work only when he wants to. The girl tells him things are not what he thought and suggests he take a short break. X apologizes and admits he was a bit tense. The hero notices the tea smells delicious, and Ryuka asks if he has calmed down. X thanks her and agrees. Saying it is a large silver coin as a reward, she offers to take it, and the hero is very grateful. The girl says it is hard to lower your standard of living once it has risen, and you will have to do the hard things you did before. Notes that the tea tastes delicious and that the hero's magic is too convenient. The girl asks whether the hero is listening. Ryuka gives an extra reward. She offers her apology to the hero. He tells her to stop playing with her food. Confused, Ryuka still eats the food. The servant tells the chief chamberlain the report has been compiled. He asks if the mage has no rank and is defective, and the young man confirms it. He notices a cool breeze always blowing from the magical instrument the princess received at the evening reception, and wonders if it might be a hidden weapon. Grandfather, surprised, asks what the hero is thinking, and says that X's desire is to avoid work. The grandfather hears a voice and asks who it is, then looks surprised when he recognizes the princess's voice, and the girl suggests they go ask him directly. He notices the weather is awful today, and a knock at the door makes him wonder who it is. She hopes X is still there, and says she couldn't convince the hero the other day to return as an adventurer. The girl says she's now with guildmaster and that X will definitely forgive the hero if he apologizes. The guildmaster says X caused her a lot of trouble but accepts it, and confirms X resigned because of the Viscount's unreasonable demands. The man offers to pay him 10 gold pieces for the job and give him an exclusive contract with higher pay. The butler wonders whether they expect the hero to return with that attitude. The master is offering 100 gold coins and an exclusive contract. He says this is more than expected, warns the hero may be dissatisfied from mistrust, and offers to help for only 5 gold coins. The master reassures Mr. Yes, man, saying there is no need to worry. He laughs as X looks surprised. X admits he quit and asks the other to leave, saying he has nothing to say, and the master, irritated, calls the mages damned. He says he spent almost the entire amount on a new house, and the hero says he does not even worry about the fate of another guild member. He adds that he could give X an A rank, though he would do so reluctantly. The master notes that when X was an E rank, X made good money on the side with the master's help. He insists they won't bother anyone. The master offers to come in and talk about everything. The hero replies that he came all this way to see him. X asks to be left alone, and the surprised guildmaster wants to know what he said. The hero flatly says he does not want to. He adds that he thinks they should leave while the girl says they came here to apologize. The guildmaster says he is sorry and will apologize as Mr. X requested. X realizes people took Kuma's words seriously. The hero says that since they have done what they came to do, it is time for them to leave. The master says Mr. X has a place in Class A and asks him to return to the guild. The hero doubts that Class A is great. X announces he will never return and asks to leave. The young man says being in the guild is just a thankless task to him. Guildmaster asks them to wait and listen to him. X is glad he was able to tell the man this. The young man feels better. The master will review her job description. She asks Mr. X out on a date. The hero realizes X has changed his mind and is pleased. X says that if they do not leave now, he will leave the city. The man says they are sitting down and retreating and asks them not to rush. The girl looks surprised as the man walks away. He wants others at work to succeed. X decides to tell Ryuka what he just did. Turning to the guildmaster, the girl asks him to wait. According to her, if the hero had gone to another city, that would have been their chance. The guildmaster says he already spent the reward and cannot release Axel Eve just for them, fearing that if Axel Eve belongs to the Viscount will punish him. He reassures her that he has a secret plan. The master accepts full responsibility and asks the adventurers to wait 3 days. The girl will use her charm and charisma for those 3 days. The hero wonders whether it's time to use the magical tool he hid in the warehouse's secret room, believing it would be a waste at this level, but seeing no other option. The Ring of Slavery is a magical tool whose owner loses 1 level of magic, has their psychic energy absorbed, and is forced to receive telepathic messages they cannot ignore. The master warns the hero will pay for opposing him, noting it is a challenge for an imperfect wizard who can use only basic magic. The hero lists the magic levels as advanced, intermediate, basic, and 0, and says the ring prevents using large amounts of magic. He is unsure it will work on the main character, so he decides to learn at least intermediate magic. The guildmaster is surprised he has laughed at Axe so many times and asks them to wait, saying they have money. Noticing it is a guild deposit, the man says he never thought he would become a fugitive because of his actions and adds it will be somewhat dangerous since they must go through a demon forest. The hero decides he must leave and start life from scratch, yet doubts he can overcome the stark forest. He asks about the new defense he heard of, saying it is just a crude iron wire. The guildmaster admits he did not know the city was under such protection. Realizing this won't affect people, the hero just needs to climb over the wire. He is surprised, struck by X's deafening magical blasts. The butler points out that if Yesman tried to escape, he apparently failed the Viscount's task. The guildmaster asks whether he created the electric fence. The youth points out that the forest guard is under the protection of the Viscount. The butler says the forester also does his job well. The hero explains they were forced to do all the heavy lifting building the fences, including acts, and says it's just a basic electrical shock that lasts an unusually long time. A man threatens a prisoner with 5 years of forced labor in the gold mines because the prisoner has 5 coins. The guild found them with the master. They returned the money and left the guildmaster behind. But the butler found something else. He offers to let him keep the ring, but only if he wears it on his finger. The guildmaster refuses to put on the ring, but he must answer for what he did. The butler orders the master sent to the mines. The man feels the heat drain from his body. The hero runs into the butler on the street and realizes they have not seen each other in a long time. The baller asks whether it is true that the hero left the guild, and adds that he was paid in advance for the work, so X cannot refuse to complete the task. He refuses outright to do the Viscount's work, no matter the reward. The butler realizes he was deceived when the guildmaster fails to hand over any of the gold coins entrusted to him. The young man is certain the man will pay for his deception. The guildmaster is burdened by the ring, and it will be removed only when he serves his sentence. He knows he must spend 5 years in harsh conditions, but does not know that Yesman added 100 years to his sentence after learning of the deception. The Viscount says the meeting with the princess is near, stressing the need to finish the task and to make 200 pipes as a gift as soon as possible. He suggests sending someone else on the mission, and the young man agrees but says he was told only X could do it. Another character offers to kidnap the young magician, showing cunning and a willingness to act dishonestly. The heroes discuss their plan. One calls Urakar the king of the slums, and they agree to use him for their own ends, though another hero doubts it and asks to reconsider. The young mage is already in captivity. Someone confidently says it will be enough to give him a room in the basement and treat him politely so he will stop resisting. The Viscount shows surprise and admiration, calling the plan interesting and not badly thought out. The others agree, but one doubts whether the hero is serious. He notes that kidnapping is bad form and says their bait plan will work. The Viscount thinks kidnapping is impractical and recommends simply calling the target and using an attractive woman to lure them into a trap. The hero looks puzzled and surprised upon hearing the word bait. Rakara says every criminal group has its own specialty. His group is known for mistreatment, and he stresses they do not have beautiful women to carry out such a plan. Ordering his men to gather everyone, he shows confidence and readiness to act. When he sees who they bring, Urakara is shocked. A little girl looks ill and anxious. An older woman says she feels young inside despite her age, and a pregnant woman is with them. The hero searches for someone fit for his goal, but says he has no one, and admits he does not even know who would be suitable. Irritated, the heroine says she'll have to make all the decisions herself again. A different hero calls her little sister, and she answers dryly, making her displeasure clear. Reminding him she is his girlfriend, she assures him he can fully rely on her, showing trust and an emotional bond. The heroine says Urukara is the only one she loves. Urukara thinks she is excellent, and that is why he fell in love with her. The hero doubts the appeal of the girl chosen for the plan and questions her ability to handle the task. The hero tests his confidence with a coin toss. Heads means he picks this girl. Tails means he must find someone else. While flipping a coin, the man suddenly drops it, leaving him irritated and frustrated as he complains that he lost his concentration and his good mood. The boy points out that the hero dropped the coin. Even after losing the coin, Urukara says the decision has already been made. The boy hesitates to be the bait, saying he is male and cannot take that role. The girl scolds the hero for whining and reminds him she borrowed his favorite outfit. The man calls the girl sister and notices the second hero but cannot determine the hero's gender from appearance. The hero confirms he is male, though his appearance can be misleading. The sister deduces it is X. Seeing the other character as carefree, she takes that as a positive sign. Spotting a beautiful woman beside X, she asks who she is. Another character says their plan will fail with the girl here and suggests they go home. The sister confirms they have the advantage and must stay, and firmly vows to do everything for Urukara, even if it means losing. The group spots the three people who were watching them earlier approaching, and X sees Ryuka is scared. X asks the girl what it is they want from them. The girl encourages enjoying herself, smiling, and showing cheerfulness. Ryuka reacts with surprise. The toy bear notices someone has invaded the hero's personal space during their walk and points out a man among the intruders, surprising the heroes. He stresses the situation has changed and they can no longer act the same as before. The boy says their numbers do not matter now that they have been exposed. The boy admits they tried to trap the hero with bait, but now they see it failed. He says he's disappointed and that everything would have been fine if the girl hadn't been there. Another character speaks to the heroes, asks them to pretend the plan succeeded, and suggests going to the VEI count to continue the plan. The boy says it's better to volunteer than be kidnapped, and the man adds that protecting his sister's reputation is important. The young hero flatly refuses to carry out the proposed plan and says he will not participate. Stepping away, the sister says everything could have worked out if everyone had stuck to the original plan, and the group of heroes admits the situation has spiraled out of control and become too noisy. X thinks they didn't know about the trap and watches the opponents leave, noting their actions were surprisingly simple and direct, and Ryuka turns to X and says he was cool. Urukara said he was surprised anyone could resist someone as beautiful as his girlfriend, and she apologized for her mistake. The man sounds annoyed, saying that X is bothering him. A boy approaches whom he may know as the magician. Urukara says he has orders to take him to the vicar, stressing how serious it is, then offers to help the boy and asks what he wants in return. The boy agrees, saying he needs cold medicine too and assumes it is for the child who just left. The child firmly says he is done. Rikara doubts the child's decision because using children goes against his principles. The girl notices her boyfriend has solved the problem and flatly refuses any more bait, saying he will not use people like that anymore, especially not his girlfriend. The hero thanks Axe for coming to the Viscount and asks if he can return to work, but the magician becomes angry. Outraged, the young hero condemns using people as bait and demands to know how this can happen, especially when children are involved. The servant says it might be a mistake, but the hero accuses him of dodging responsibility despite the facts. X tells him he heard about a deal for medicine for a sick child. The servant accuses Urukar of mistreating the children. The boy admires Urukar and says he would do anything for his friend. X replies that he despises everyone. The Viscount greets Axe with a warm, relieved tone, his voice showing satisfaction that the hero has finally arrived. The man knew the young man would fall into a trap. Ordering the hero to begin work, he confirmed his instructions. The hero flatly refuses to comply with the demands and says he will never obey this man. X insists he will never forgive such treatment of children, suggests going home, and offers to buy medicine for his friend to show his concern and willingness to help. X, the hero, is about to leave, but the Viscount stops him and asks him to wait, offering to talk again. Rumors from Emergent claim the Viscount is using children for an unknown purpose, and she says this has badly damaged the Viscount's reputation. Dressed in a smart dress, a girl says excitedly that she is now going to see the great magician. Grandfather is surprised to find that Princess Lula went to X herself. The guards regret they did not stop Princess Lulu in time, saying she left too quickly for them to intervene. The older character worries that consulting Princess Lula was a mistake. Princess Lula is the third princess, 12 years old and a little younger than her sisters. Her face looks innocent yet intelligent, and she once brought along an unusual object. Calling it a gift from the Viscount, she describes it as a cool, light breeze. The man asks what it is and asks her to give it to him. Rampa feels a strange sensation from the object he's holding, uses his ability to check its danger level and finds it's level 1, and wonders why the item gives him that odd feeling. Grandfather notes that nothing in the city has caught their attention until now, and he asks to borrow another one for a moment, but Lula warns him not to break it because it belongs to her sister. Hero technician Herman assumes the object is a new type of magical tool and studies the situation in the Royal Laboratory of Magical Technologies. The hero learns the princess bought the item at a dinner party on Viscount Roderick's orders and is surprised that aristocrats would know about it, though he does not know the details. Herman finds the object very light and asks to take it apart, but his grandfather warns that the princess will be furious if he does. He wonders if the formula is written on the magical stone carved into a cylinder. The boy mentions demonic tools and special relics, pointing out small ice cubes inside the cylinder and a crack that lets wind through. The hero answers no and is surprised because he cannot find what should be there. The grandfather asks what happened. The technician says the cylinder is missing its contents, looking shocked and displeased and stressing that this is wrong. Grandfather agrees, adding that it is a basic occupation, though he used to do engravings. The hero clarifies he does not mean engraving. Herman finds no magic formula or energy source inside the cylinder, not even a magic stone. He explains these are not ordinary magical tools, but a structure holding an ice orb and wind element magic, and the hero is amazed, calling the device incredible. Grandpa agrees that if this item is connected to X, they do not yet know how to interact with it. The princess says this must be the work of a great magician, speaking confidently. Grandfather objects to the princess's assumption, saying it is more likely a long-term effect of basic magic. The princess is ready to fetch the item, emphasizes the need to act, and says they must give her sister the top pat as soon as possible because it will be a surprise. The butler plans to hire a magician. The investigation revealed the story of a young man who doesn't want to work. The princess advises asking the hero himself about his story, since only he can give precise answers. She believes that a person who does not want to work should explain his motives himself. Realizing he may have missed an obvious solution, he offers to arrange a meeting with Axe soon if he can. Grandfather points out the princess acted too quickly and approached the hero on her own. After changing clothes at the villa, Lulu points out that the place is nearby. The princess asks X what he is doing, and he says he is looking for a child to give it to. The girl volunteers to help the hero find the child, showing enthusiasm and readiness to act. The hero noticed the girl suddenly run away, leaving him alone, looking surprised and worried and unsure where she went. The girl runs over to the cat and says he might like shashlik so she can feed it to him. The hero notices the cat won't eat the shashlik. At this point, X asks why she is here, points out her presence, and the child recognizes X's brother and reacts with joy. Nita asks for another kebab the hero is holding, and he says he just bought some medicine for Rin. Admitting he is unemployed and low on funds, he says he still bought medicine, that it pains him to meet the other person's gaze, and that he is sure people find his behavior suspicious. X hopes Lulu can find the one she needs. Lulu addresses the hero, calling him the Great Wizard X. The hero introduces himself as a wizard who was called defective. The girl apologizes and expresses regret. She then admits she wanted to ask the item's creator to make one for her. X believes it was made at the Viscount's request. The hero describes the object as cool and light and confirms it is his creation. Surprised to learn the hero can make another one, the girl asks for 2 and the hero agrees. Lulu brightens when she sees the person she has been looking for, X, the Great Wizard, standing before her, and tells him how happy she is to meet him. The hero admits he can only use basic magic, so he cannot be a great wizard. X demonstrates the wind and ice ball spells, and the girl admires him. The hero asks the girl not to tell anyone he is a magician and to keep it between them, and she agrees it will be their secret. The princess thanks the hero and calls him Great Wizard X. X notes that while the situation is amusing, it is not that bad, and after proving himself a great wizard today, the young man knows he must not tell the beast man about this. The grandfather asks the princess where she has been all this time, showing surprise and worry about her absence. The butler says everyone was worried about her long absence. She hands her grandfather a gift and calls him the old man. He notices the pipe isn't the one they originally had. The princess says she asked X to make the same items for her on credit. She insists the royal family cannot stay in debt and the service must be repaid. The hero faces two problems. One is that he often meets suspicious people in expensive clothes outside the tavern. He adds that despite this, he still refused the offer. X fears he will run out of money soon, and that is his second problem. He says he can't go back to eating mucus like before because his diet has changed. And the hero adds he even ordered juice after dining at a restaurant yesterday. The mage has warm stones called sky demon stones that contain a weak fire spell. The hero is unsure what to do next, admitting he doesn't want to work but needs the money. X chooses to gamble to win a fortune. The hero says the chest is just a way to pass the time while the luck-boosting buff fades, and his own magic will keep working for a long time, showing his confidence in his abilities. The young man admits that the very idea of gambling is wrong, but still thinks his plan is sneaky and profitable. Nitro greets X, startling him. The hero asks how his girlfriend, who he gave the medicine to, is doing. X remembers his girlfriend from the potion shop seems to be taking revenge on him for haggling with her for so long. Saying he had already received help, he asked that it be passed to another girl so she would not feel she owed thanks. X praised Nitra, saying he was a good boy. The hero admitted he would buy him shashlik, but accidentally touched the wallet. Nitra asked X if he had run out of money because the medicine was very expensive. He explained Rai's illness wasn't a cold but a curse from Fala, and its cure was an expensive elven elixir. The hero said everything was fine and there was no need to worry, and he offered to take the money and buy the elixir for Rai. Extrepided said you could only buy what you normally couldn't afford, and assured that everything would be fine. Nitra agreed, though he hesitated a little. The hero confirmed he now had no money. Nitra thanks the hero, expressing gratitude for his help and actions. The hero feels calm and relaxed, filled with satisfaction and joy. He wonders how to live now, choosing between helping tomorrow or looking after Lena's shop, and admits he has no money but feels warmth in his soul. X notices even the stones in his pocket are warm. The magician considers selling his warm stones to a wealthy man desperate for amusement. The hero, wearing an elegant suit and top hat, projects optimism and hope, and asks if he has thought about dinner. Lula sits at the table with a cup of tea, thinks of her assistant, and says that thanks to him they will go to meet the great magician. Cheyenne, Lula's sister, is eager to meet the person who made the cool pipe she saw. Xian admits Lula seems so naive it worries her, and they consider meeting the person who made the pipe. The heroine wonders why her companion avoided dining with her until now, but suddenly invited her, and she senses the mysterious magician has set the terms and is trying to understand what he wants. Xian says she's heard that all mages are eccentric and worries a mage could be a bad influence on her sister Lulu. The mentor agrees but warns that certain precautions must be taken, and the girl does not understand which ones. Grandfather explains that the word work is banned around the magician, and the others are surprised because they do not understand the reason for the rule. Lulu can tell the hero mage doesn't want to work. She often thinks it's unfair when people avoid responsibility and take advantage of others, and she feels trapped like a bird in a cage. Sternly, the older man warns Mishayon not to ask about his source of income, why he is not working, or when he will start working, and says those questions are strictly forbidden. Lula asks her sister about it, and the sister says she understands the situation. The girl notices that her own smile is a little strange. Surprised and unsure where he is being taken, the hero did not expect to ride in such an amazing carriage, and feels excited. Thank you for watching. The young man reassures him that this is only an escort. The hero grows homesick and begins to think the person he met might be of noble birth. X admits he had been to this place before, but never imagined they would end up here. The hero is surprised to discover hidden paths known only to a few trusted people. An attendant in an elegant suit and top hat invites performers to enter. He asks if the magician is okay, sounding confused. The magician looks surprised and cannot think of a response. The hero suggests this place might be a teleportation portal, noting the cafe is a secluded corner and admitting he did not expect to find a secret door here. The servant grows impatient and warns they will be late unless they hurry. The hero says this is his first teleport and plans to show off to his friends Ruka and Kuma when he gets back. A group of people meets a hero. A character politely asks the hero to go to the indicated door, guiding what to do next. X admits City came for the food and did not expect to see this kind of performance. A girl in the group catches the hero's eye. Lula recognizes the hero as the great magician and voices her admiration while acknowledging his status. X sees Lulu and remembers she once helped him. He suspects someone else invited him today, and the other character says he is just a servant. The hero notices the second girl resembles Lula's sister and points out their physical similarity. The girl introduced herself as Xion, presented her sister Lulu and the butler, then thanked the hero and called him Great Sage X. The hero admits he's not a good magician and is often called a defective magician. But Lula says that if he did what people claim, he'd be a great magician. Lulu suggests they start dinner now that everyone has met, and Xion notes that among the upper classes, the ingredients and the order of the dishes matter. The hero notices spoons of different sizes on the table and suggests choosing the largest one if in doubt, adding that the soup looks delicious. The hero admits he dislikes one of the spoons. The girl beside him says using the largest spoon can mean someone is short on money. X asks where the sister's parents are today. She and Grandpa think he has requested a private audience with the king. Lula says her parents are busy, and the hero feels bad about it. Lula points to a handy soup spoon and shows how to use it. The hero thanks her for the tip. Xion wonders whether their conversation was a coincidence. Sean says she won't ask him any questions. The girl wonders if her refusal gesture was a mistake and asks whether the hero has anything in common with them. Seeing how delicious the food looks, the hero admits he is already too full to eat. X wishes they hadn't eaten before the trip. The grandfather asks if the hero has any problems, and the hero looks puzzled. X says he wanted to sell something, showing he intended to discuss the matter. The hero says the stones stay warm in winter, and the girl asks how much he wants for them. The seller says it's just a magic stone with entry-level fire magic, Ho.01, a free material. The hero admits he has trouble understanding the pricing and would like to sell the stone for more if possible. Ryuka suggests letting the buyer set the product's price so it can be sold at a higher price. The X agrees with the proposal and says to leave the price decision to the buyer, and the girl confirms and suggests they continue that way. Lula points out that everything costs just 1 gold coin and is genuinely surprised to learn the price is a whole gold coin. She admits she doesn't know the right answer to the question, wonders why a hero who has already proved themselves wants it so much, and notes that refusal could make the hero turn against them. Lula suggests resuming the discussion of the issue. Xion agrees with her and says the answer might change his mind. Lula says she is the only one who believes in the great Mage. He says at most 7 small silver coins are needed, and the hero insists silver will do even for the wealthy. 3 people sit at a table, satisfied and in agreement about a decision, with a mountain of gold in front of them. X notices he is suddenly bragging about his wealth and says he could demand a large silver coin without hesitation. The girl turns to the hero and tells him he alone decides the reward amount. Considering whether to take one of the coins, he notes that every coin on the table is gold, and Xion gives the hero the freedom to choose. Preferring a large silver coin, he thought that would be best, though a gold one might be allowed, and he is surprised by how many there are, and unsure how to find the genuine coin among the fakes. Is this what Xion wanted, X wonders? He admits he can't use evaluation magic to tell them apart, and says he doesn't know how to distinguish the objects because they look identical. The girl notices the hero's strange expression and says they need to hurry. The hero says this is his reward and is confident in his choice. The girl doubts the hero's choice and asks if he is certain it is the right decision. Lula stands beside Sheena, showing faith in the great magician and offering support and respect. Sheena notes that not wanting to work did not make the hero greedy, The girl asks the hero, Mr. X, if he will share his features and expresses interest in learning more about his abilities. Its specialty is extending spell durations, which is very useful. It admits that relying only on elementary magic can be difficult. The heroine notes that elementary magic is too weak for serious tasks. X reveals he studied advanced magic but abandoned it. The girl is surprised to learn the hero discarded an entire tier of magic and compares herself to a caged bird trapped by her royal family. Xion asks if he regrets his choice. He says he chose his own path and cannot tell whether it was easier or harder. The hero admits to being incompetent and getting worse by the minute. The girl notices the hero has discarded his own advantages. She reveals she believed it was her destiny to marry by the minister's orders and felt doomed, and adds that if the hero gives up his advantages, he can be free. Introducing herself as Lula Whiting, the girl says she recognizes the hero as a great magician. Lula firmly tells the hero never to call himself incompetent again. Grateful, the hero thanks the girl for her words, showing joy and gratitude. The girl thanks the hero for a pleasant time, saying she enjoyed it too, and promising to take care of the stones. She asks him to come again, and X says goodbye to Lula. X thinks about the guide who won't return and spots a gold coin. Uncertain the coin is genuine, the hero decides to test it, and says that if it is, he will return with 10 large silver coins. Xion is taken aback by how many gold coins there are and asks what to do with them. Grandfather confirms he is aware of the situation. She only says she will ensure the gold reaches him naturally. When Lula acknowledged X officially became a great mage of the royal family, though he had not heard of it because he thought it was fiction, and was suddenly registered as a top-ranking sorcerer. The Academy of Mages is a vast organization similar to an adventurer's guild. Documents show that X is ranked 9th. The hero says he has never heard of such a person, and suggests it might be the king's illegitimate child. The old mage says the princess may have been joking too often. The employee points out they still do not know who X is. The magician suggests starting the search over, saying it's ridiculous. Teacher Kukur offers to help find the student. The girl searches worldwide for the name X. Search results show X is currently not working. Kukur notes that nothing was found, sounding surprised or disappointed. The documents show X used to be an E-rank Adventurers Guild member. His nickname was Defective Mage. Owl seems satisfied and says this is all she found. The old man wonders why he had to join the guild if he never intended to work there. The girl tells him to calm down and suggests X probably joined only as a disguise. Owl sees again that X is listed in the Adventurers Guild as D rank with the nickname Defective Mage, and the mage is surprised the hero was just demoted. Kukur says this cannot be true of a man who became a great magician. The girl was surprised and said the choice was accurate. Worried, the girl asks why the counter-magic had no effect and doesn't understand what's happening. The heroine is unsure what it means to mention the great wizard X. X learned magic from the high elves in the Red Forest and was recommended to join the Adventurers Guild, but when he tried to join, he was ridiculed for sacrificing basic magic. Lula says X is officially a mage now because she made him a great mage. The butler says the others will be very surprised. The heroes admit they don't know how any of this happened, but they've set traps to track them. X is asked his name. The hero suggests the name X and says EQs would be correct. Another character says that, apart from pronunciation, the names are similar and offers support for the hero. X agrees that walking is good for your health, so he goes for a walk to think about what to do today. The girl suggests they team up or play with Ryuka. X offers to invite him along or to buy something for Nitra and her sister Rai. The hero notices Nitra looks bored after they find all the treasures in the moat. The young man asks whether meeting Lena was a coincidence. The woman offers him the cloud cakes he wanted. X says she's afraid she has other plans. Hero confirms he did want them. They also tell X a nervous girl was looking for him, and he says he doesn't know anyone like that. It turned out the girl didn't have a stuffed animal. The girl says goodbye and adds that Mr. X will have to come back soon. The hero wonders who could be searching for him so actively and doubts that such people really exist. Another girl beams with joy after finding this magician. X catches the fear in the girl's eyes and says he's seen her somewhere before. The girl asks the hero to cast a buff spell on her right away. He says the buffs were unnecessary. The hero replies that he does not want to use the buff spell and would rather rest than keep going in the same way. She also asks how much she should pay the hero or whether he needs money, and X notices everyone is watching and suggests she consider if she really needs the spell. The girl asks the hero to do it again because he alone was special. The girl says she is the most popular in the city and is willing to trade her body for it. Another girl firmly tells the first girl to step away from the hero, adopts a defensive stance, and shows clear disapproval of her behavior. X asks the other girl if she is Mara, an S-rank adventurer, and if she will help him. Mara happily announces that X will stay the night with her. The girl flatly refuses to spend the night with the first girl. Mara casts the Shadowbird spell. Bound by Mara's magic, the girl asks the hero not to leave. Where the hero fell feels so comfortable he compares it to the most luxurious pillows. Mara keeps demanding buffs from him, showing her persistence and eagerness for magical enhancements. The girl invites the hero to explain what she does, so he can make an informed choice. Sarah says that just a few days ago she was hooked on the idea of the great old woman, and the hero wonders if the woman really exists. Shrouded in a dark hood and known by many names, driven by a desire for eternity, this fortune-telling witch whose body is trapped in the void sees the future and has lived for thousands of years, leaving doubt about his true identity. The character advises staying calm, listening, and avoiding certain things, introduces a new defense called Forest Guard, and notes a talisman called Buff 1 Inch will help overcome the obstacle. She says that's what the witch said earlier, and X is disappointed because he ran out of magic. Syra thanks him, exhales in relief, and wonders if she had to be so stubborn, while X apologizes for dragging her into this situation. The girl introduces herself as Mara Eon and says she does not have X's magic, admitting she is not feeling well right now. The girl who introduces herself as Mara Ion says she feels sick without X's magic. Sarah asks the hero to do whatever he wants with her, since she has no income unless she sells her research, and X says there is no need to be stupid, and reminds her he will pay the money after the research is sold. The girl thanks him for his support. The hero explains the protection is magical, so its structure cannot be proven. He says this is why he came to the city to investigate rumors of a new kind of protection. He notes it was only a stun. The hero explains that lightning made by magic is energy without a power source, and is just the result of technique. The girl worries she may have chosen the wrong approach. She says magic may be impossible, but science can create electrical discharges. X asks Syra why she works so hard. Syra says her sense of mission is the main reason and admits that's childish nonsense, but she wants to be great and for everyone to look up to her. She asks whether she offended him. The hero understands why she works and finds it normal. Mara says she does not want to do it. She says it's hard to forget the gratitude of children. Mara thanks X for all his help and support. The heroine suggested meeting again later. They happily said it had been fun and interesting. The hero says he's finally come to play, notes that Ryuka rarely leaves the house, but decides to go inside anyway. The hero tells Ryuka he is here to play, knowing this may surprise her. The girl with the cake and the others greet the hero, congratulating him on being a great magician and showing respect and joy. The boy reminds Ryuka she was wrong to suggest reading the newspaper. She says X, pointing at the hero. The hero denies it and claims it is Mr. H's. The hero points to a newspaper headline showing the name X in big letters and suggests that removing one letter will reveal who it's about. Ryuka beside him looks baffled and asks what this fuss is about, and a large cake sits on the table while the hero says it's delicious. X proclaims himself the Great Wizard X, confident in his new role. The girl asks when she'll be back at work, signaling the need to resume their activities or meetings. Ryuka asks the hero whether he plans to leave, noting that his money will soon run out. The hero replies, surprised that Ryuka has already worked and made an excellent cake. The girl speaks happily, showing enthusiasm. He admits he sold the warm stone for a gold coin, proving the trade was successful. X says it's his and can be used with something else. Teddy Bear suggests using the decoration for heating. Ryuka recommends using an old pocket watch for this, noting the metal heats up easily. X suggests giving the bear cub to Kumu, but Kumu refuses, saying it will burn. Ryuka also asks the hero not to be rude to the animal. X reassures the girl that she doesn't need to worry because the magical flame is different from ordinary fire and will not burn. The hero confirms the fire enchanting the wood will not turn it into coal, assuring the situation is safe. A small animal suggests a course of action, and the hero agrees. A second animal resembling a hare also joins in. This moment links an addiction to cold with a feverish joy for life. The hero casts a spell that brings the warmth of summer into the characters' hearts. Two plush-like animals beam with pleasure and joy. Ryuka hugs one of the animals, calls it Kuma, and says it is so warm, showing her affection. The girl notices the animal looks alive, and the hero admits it is. X is glad everyone liked his idea. The girl asks the hero X to move away. The hero asks whether she is jealous of the doll and says being jealous is her duty. The hero confirms it's about the cake and asks if he can help with anything. The girl asks Hero X to listen and says there is one place she wants to go. Announcing he has come for Ryuka, the hero calls her name with joy. Ryuka reacts to the hero's greeting with surprise and joy. The girl says the music festival will be in Shiptown and admits she was so excited she couldn't sleep last night. The hero replied it would be fun. Seeing the coachman in a good mood, the hero says the only way to reach the neighboring town is by carriage, and he cannot thank Ryuku for that. The hero asks Ryuku whether she left the rabbits at home. Ryuka worries because she has never been on vacation, and Kuma comforts her, saying the heroes will apologize to the other toys later. The young man notices that the Viscount has promised to distribute these pipes to the nobles, and time is running out. So he insists that X be forced to make 200 of these pipes as soon as possible. The girl asks the boy who he is, clearly surprised and eager to learn more about his personality. He adds that he serves as the Viscount's butler. The girl replies that the gentleman has been away for 3 days. The butler finds it odd that the girl in Axe's room is playing maid, even though he scolds others for it, and another character asks who is there after hearing the noise. The hero is sure he recognizes the man. Nitro points out that this is the Viscount's assistant. Rai confirms she was actually the one who was sick at that moment. The girl admits her illness was not a cold, but a curse from the headlight and says, Mr. X helped by giving his money to save her. The girl is relieved she can keep using Mr. Axe's room until they find a new place to live, and they notice the fire did not take that away. The hero admits he gave a false impression of the magician and says the man is actually good. Nitra says the great mage is always buying her kebabs, and the girl calls to tell Nitra it's a secret. The man says it is impossible to believe that someone could be made to call him a great magician using only simple magic. The butler decides to pretend he did not hear the conversation. The butler realizes X is unlikely to return anytime soon and leaves the heroes. Believing X is likely heading to Shiptown, the hero notices the grim wars on the gates can record the ID details of those who come and go. The butler says the territorial army has been notified of the situation. Any grim war with the name X must be guarded, and anyone without identification must be detained. The man says X is on vacation, that they agreed to make 200 tubes before X left, and that he will not get out of this situation easily. On the second morning in the small town of Shiptown, everything was calm and measured. X knocked carefully on Ryuki's door. Opening the door smoothly, he froze on the threshold at the sight of her, still sleepy and a bit rumpled. Though sluggish that morning, she smiled at him as if welcoming the new day and its hero, quietly wishing him good morning. X said he'd prepared milk for her for breakfast, and she accepted it gratefully. Settling onto the bed, they sit close together in the small room's cozy space. The girl apologized to the young man for not being able to go to the music festival with him, and regretted missing the chance to spend time together. X told her not to worry, saying everything had gone perfectly, and he had especially enjoyed the carriage ride. Reminding them once more how far they'd come, he tried to find something else to talk about. During the conversation, he said the guildmaster had destroyed his old map for some reason, and he now wants to make a new one to continue his business. The confession surprised her and explained his lack of identification and odd behavior. X stood behind her, beaming with hope and joy while she looked at him with annoyance. They kept talking, and she said she was happy with how things turned out because now X could become a great magician, and he said he planned to become a merchant selling his goods. Bowing his head, he said he would make a new guild map. Ryuka sat on the bed with her fists clenched, and after thinking for a long time about the situation, she suddenly said she would go with him. He tried to tell her she didn't have to come, but she turned away and said firmly he might get into trouble if she didn't go with him. He began convincing her he wasn't too weak to cope on his own and that everything would be fine. But at that moment, a teddy bear flew up to him. The bear cub whispered in his ear, saying it was about girls who might fall in love with a young man, and that Ryuko was afraid of those situations and feelings. With a plush animal on his shoulder, the man considered what had been said and came up with a new idea that might solve the problem. He reassured the heroine that everything would be fine if he made new friends, but she said she considered those friends her best friends. X heard her harsh words telling him he didn't understand anything and thought about the accusation. They walked the city's quiet streets, watching their surroundings. X expected they'd reach the trading guild soon and wrap up their business, while Ryuka walked beside them, lost in thought. She said she felt someone watching her. He asked where exactly these glances came from, and she said women were watching her. Lost in thought, he was cut off when Ryuka glared at him with anger and displeasure. They finally reached the commercial guild and were met by a female employee. The men said a guild card was all they needed, while the woman pointed out they could get by without one. Fed up with the employee's stubbornness, the bear intervened and demanded that she stop resisting and accept their request. Shocked by the talking toy, the woman watched as X ran off quickly to avoid making the situation worse. Back in Ryukai, he said that if the bear spoke, even the bravest person would be frightened. Suddenly they spun and saw their pursuer's tail flash past them. Two strangers peered out from behind a wooden box. The hero froze at what he saw, genuinely afraid when he realized they were being followed. Although afraid, the pursuers apologized, came out to meet them, promised not to harm them, and offered to follow them, surprising the boys. They were told everything would happen quickly, and before long they were on a large ship. They were told to come in and say the gentleman was already waiting for them on board. The heroes stood there, unsure what those figures wanted from them in that mysterious place. In a large room, a girl sat in a chair with her palm against her cheek. Ryoka asked X who the woman was who had greeted them so warmly. The woman heard the question and introduced herself as Queen Amina. The boys greeted her politely, gave their names, and listened respectfully to the queen, who ordered the servants to leave the room. They asked how they could help the queen to show their goodwill and respect. The queen said she had recently received an unusual report. Smiling, she admitted her curiosity had gotten the better of her and she couldn't resist stepping in. Extud was slightly shocked by this turn of events, not expecting to hear such a confession, while the queen settled comfortably in the chair. Propping her cheeks gently with her hands, she watched Axe's reaction. The queen suddenly grew interested in Ryuki's handbag and asked where Ryuki had gotten such an unusual item. Amine admitted she is a big fan of the Crazy Doll brand and dreams of getting a similar bag for herself. The boys suspected the queen had only invited them to learn more about the bag. X turned to her, tense, waiting for an answer. With a slight smirk, Ryuka said X was unpopular, so the queen watched them with pity. Embarrassed, he said he was very ashamed of that assessment, opening his mouth as if to object but unable to find the words. The legend of the hero's great popularity never took off. He covered his face with his hands, trying to hide his awkwardness and embarrassment. Surprised, the queen looked at them, unable to understand why they were acting so strangely. She asked again where they got the bag from. Ryoko whispered to her companion that she didn't want to tell the queen where the bag came from, while the hero stood with his face in his hands. The heroine remains silent, reluctant to tell the queen, and he quietly confirms that he understood her position and respected her decision. The queen asked what was going on, but the young man reintroduced himself to ease the awkwardness and explain the situation. He revealed that Ryuka designed the Crazy Doll collection, which genuinely surprised and intrigued the queen. The queen stood with her mouth open in surprise and admitted she was a big fan of Ryuki's work. Slightly embarrassed, Amine asked if it would be possible to place an order with Ryuki herself, expressing genuine interest and admiration for her work. He began explaining that she wasn't only focused on money, but cared about every client. Putting her heart into her work, the queen asked about his relationship with the girl. She winked and smiled, assuming he was Ryuki's boyfriend, which left them both slightly embarrassed. He hesitated, unsure how to answer, and the girl with a funny look remarked that the queen had gotten a little ahead of herself. Overcome with joy, the queen could hardly believe her ears, and she exclaimed as her mood grew even brighter. She said she was in a great mood and that the boys could ask her for anything they wanted. The guests were stunned by her generosity. The bear cub whispered to the young man that it was time to get an ID card, reminding him of important things. The queen heard this and asked whether Axe really had no ID. Axe began to explain. She agreed to grant their wish, and the boys could hardly believe their luck. Someone brought them a priest's medal, and at first they doubted it was genuine. The queen said the medal was meant for gifted people and could serve as identification. The hero nervously tugged Axis's sleeve, drawing his attention and turning to her, feeling supported. Tenderly, she examined the medal and said everything fit together perfectly, her eyes kind and confident. He agreed, and together they thanked Queen Amin for her generosity and help. She explained the medal comes with various privileges and advantages which shocked the children. Smiling slightly, the queen explained what awaited them next. She told them they could get a free drink at the bar. The young man joked, asking whether alcoholic drinks would be served. The monarch asked whether the guests welcomed the rare privilege, which might prove a real salvation later, and then suggested they listen to music. The girl stood still, while her companion explained that the girl did not like large crowds, which confused the owner of the throne. The heroine pointed out she didn't have to go to the festival and looked at the young artist. She said she would move the musicians aboard her ship. The listeners, settled in comfortably, enjoyed the sounds and understood the power and influence of the wealthy. The young man watched in amazement and delight at what was happening. Before long, the gathered people said it was time for them to return to their tent. Moving closer, she asked why they did not want to stay the night. Immediately, the teddy bear showed displeasure and said their home was much roomier and more comfortable than this place. His companion moved to calm things, assuring him everything was fine. The monarch said cheerfully that she would like to see the tent herself. Then the ship began to lift slowly into the air. Delighted by what was happening, the man savored every moment. With the alert level at 3, the owner of the thrones rushed to the wheelhouse to handle the situation. Crying out in alarm, she rushed down the corridors, leaving her companions waiting for news. With a serious expression, she opened the door and stepped into the wheelhouse, where her intrigued companions stood silently behind her. The queen asked what had happened and was told that a suspicious castle of unknown origin had appeared. Pausing, she pressed her palms to the door, faced the young man, and explained the situation. Smiling slightly, he explained that the castle he had described was their tent. The owner of the throne was stunned by what she heard and felt genuinely shocked. Once the information arrived, the alarm was lifted. Others thanked the queen for the help and transport, and she said she was always happy to help. At the castle, she admired its size. The monarch announced an event to be held here tomorrow. The young man backed the idea. They entered the so-called ghost house while the companions stepped into the castle. Everyone was amazed by the castle's well-stocked shelves and distinctive architecture that make it exceptional. A lively conversation started about the building's future, and the young man offered to stay here for a while if he wanted to. The monarch wanted to explore every corner of the castle. A commotion was already underway in the castle. The Viscount stroked his glass thoughtfully, wondering when they would finally find Axe. Called over, he turned and began talking to a man in an elegant tuxedo. Smiling as if hiding a secret, the stranger said on his way out that he wanted to introduce the Viscount to the princess. Just then, the count heard the girls nearby talking about him and smiled, expecting kind words. The conversation turned out to be nothing like what he had expected to hear. Irritated, he slammed his fists on the table and said they still had not been able to locate the faulty mage causing the alarm. The Viscount froze in horror while the young man beside him showed regret. The agitated count started cursing and shouting about the consequences if the problem wasn't solved quickly. Meanwhile, the young man wondered where the other young man was now, picturing him on a bench, lost in thought. Unsure what to do, he suddenly had an idea and headed straight to the Academy of Magicians. A powerful sorceress met him there. The young man handed her the missing person case, and she accepted the documents, surprised to recognize the name. The sorceress admitted she knew X and, out of respect, called him Sir, which surprised her young companion. She said she knows only one side of him, which means much about him is still hidden. She released her owl, announced a planet-wide search, and said he had been seen in Shiptown. The youth said there had been no reports of border violations in the area and called that impossible. She revealed the great magician mocks anyone who tries to find him and manipulates everyone. On hearing this, the young man realized the missing man was a skilled manipulator who knew his hiding place and would reveal it to everyone. A dragon carrying a rider flew over Shiptown. As the rider neared the stranger on the dragon, the stranger spotted him and the rider tensed, sensing danger. Shouting for an explanation, the stranger demanded one, but the knight confidently said he had finally found the one they had been searching for so long. Insisting it was definitely X-Rage, he rushed at him with his fists and was wrong. In a city neighborhood, a little girl walked with her mother when something unusual caught her eye. Many small toy bunnies lay scattered on the sidewalk. A crowd gathered around a small area where artisans were skillfully embroidering toy bunnies. While one character was talking, another called to him, holding a hat with coins, and told him they had received money from grateful spectators. The man praised his colleague for her initiative, and she said people put coins in on their own. Bunnies were promised to anyone who provided important information about X and the girl with the teddy bear. People actively searched for information because they strongly wanted to get a unique toy. The stuffed rabbit quietly hoped they'd be found as soon as they arrived in Shiptown because everything seemed clear. The search turned up nothing. They could not find the people they needed. Meanwhile, something important was happening in the palace. X, Luca, and Amin stood together as the young man asked to be left alone. The queen smiled and said she might fall because X had edged a little closer to her first. He said he was just making room for Ryuki. She confirmed everything was fine and the lock was very convenient for her. After a moment, she asked if the next performer had arrived yet. The door began to open. Several mysterious figures entered the room at that moment. The characters studied the strangers, and one smiled and asked for Ax's autograph. Soon he learned that one of them acted as bait. The stranger called himself Urakar, the Slum King tasked with bringing X back, and he told the young man to follow him, warning that refusal would end badly. Deep in thought, the young man realized he could not put others at risk. Standing firm, he said he would go, leaving Ryuku behind. X asks that no one harm anyone except him, a Rikar promise made with a smile to honor the agreement. Ryuka took the boy's hand and called to him, but he just smiled. He left without saying goodbye, and the girl watched him through tears. The queen asked the man why the boy was being taken away. The man replied that he had been promised gold for making captures. She said she would hire him, and he was surprised. Calmly, she offered 5 gold coins. Arukar's colleague laughed when he realized the coins were genuine. Happy Man accepted a job with Mrs. Amin. He put the young man in charge of the rye. The door closed with a slam, and the queen was pleased to have settled the matter. Meanwhile, the heroine rushed to him crying. He apologized for causing her worry, thanked the queen, and promised to repay the money. Pressed against him, the girl was asked to stop crying. She gave a pitiful look and demanded he stop his antics. She met his gaze and promised to help. He held her close and thanked her for being angry with him. Sticking out his pinky, he promised everything would be fine and that he'd start taking care of himself. They sealed the promise by crossing their little fingers, and the stuffed rabbit said he would never leave him. Rika stared at him in surprise, and the rabbit straightened up proudly. Amin said she knew what happened and that someone was looking for them, and offered to let them move to her country. He drifted into thought, absorbed in his own mind. He reflected on emptiness. X peered thoughtfully at the black ball. A tiny baby suddenly appeared before him. Carefully, he balanced on the X's palm. He realized he still knew nothing about himself, that emptiness filled everything around him, and his earlier joy had been an illusion. He faced the void and asked what it wanted X to do for her. Emptiness listened closely as the young mage apologized for forcing her to do those things. X promised to grant any wish from the void, but he was surprised. Suddenly, she gave a happy cry and said she wanted a pillow made of slime. With affection, the young man looked at the baby and smiled warmly. Suddenly, he called out to Laudit Ryuku, who stood motionless with a calm, thoughtful expression. The girl asked what was happening, and the X said they had to return home tomorrow, saying it decisively. Yes, if they were really going to leave, she admitted she was sad. She asked to come back next year to preserve those memories. The hero said it was possible for them to return. At this point, Queena told me that the travelers would set out on their journey tomorrow. She said she would ask her assistant to dismantle the tent. X replied he seemed to have forgotten to give something in return. Her response showed amazement and delight. The queen then asked each person to give 5 gold coins, and the young man looked at her in surprise. He asked if she was sure about the decision, and she wanted to know what they planned to do about the pursuers. He started outlining his plan to her and mentioned the Viscount. A mean woman spoke harshly to the man and promised the boys a ride just in case. Admitting she could not be sure they were safe, she offered to help them. He thanked her, and she fell silent. Cautiously, the stuffed rabbit asked if they could ride in the queen's carriage, but the boys said they needed time to think. The Viscount greeted the throne's owner with a joyful smile. She asked how he was doing while X and Ryuka stood behind her. The high society man turned and unexpectedly locked eyes with the young magician. An aristocrat offered the applicant a job paying 3 gold coins. However, it was obvious to him right away that the young man was unhappy. The man said firmly that he would never serve a gentleman like that. The noble representative was astonished by that sharp, decisive refusal. The throne owner reminded him that the young man had already become one of the shrine's servants, and said firmly she would not let anyone harm him, leaving the aristocrat stunned. As he tried to object, another young man cut him off. The new interlocutor calmly and persistently asked the ruler to hear his request, and the ruler listened attentively and seriously. He kept talking about his love of wine and promised to open his own wine cellar for her, then asked the aristocrat to shut up. Pleased to hear this, the mistress decided to leave the magician and the girl together. Leaving, the nobles looked deeply dissatisfied. Climbing the steps, he announced loudly that the young man would regret it. The magician said he had willingly turned down the offer, and everyone agreed that was wonderful, since the city's lord had personally stood up to defend them. The girl stressed that his actions were crucial and asked him to accompany her. He met her gaze and agreed. The companion stayed serious and kept her eyes down. They strolled down a quiet street. After arriving home, she stayed thoughtful but still remembered to say thank you. He told her to thank him. It suddenly hit her that all this time she'd been dreaming of stopping time. With her eyes closed, she hoped something would happen now to give her the strength to endure the coming trials. Deep in her soul, she knew she loved him. The more she thought about it, the more she knew she did not want anyone near him. She opened her eyes and softly asked whether she had embarrassed him by how she acted. The stuffed animal realized he would have run away long ago if he were the young man because of her persistence, and the girl, slightly annoyed, walked on. The little animal chose to act as if he hadn't heard anything. Meanwhile, the young man hurried off to find a slime pillow. Crouched low in the house's shadow, the protagonist crept along the deserted street. Two townspeople talked animatedly by the shop entrance. Near the end of the street, he heard a townsman announce a reward of a whole silver coin for anyone who could find him, and the news made him turn back. When his name was suddenly spoken, Axe froze. Confusion crossed his face as he tried to figure out who wanted him and why, but he quickly steadied himself and kept going. After moving a safe distance from the curious townspeople, Axe slowed and sank into thought. Possible reasons for the pursuit spun through his mind, and he suspected the Viscount would not accept his refusal. Convinced that no one noticed him, he relied on plain looks and simple clothes to stay unnoticed. Climbing the creaky stairs to the second floor, X met two guards who eyed him suspiciously, and the female guard held an official document and studied it closely. X was seized before he could clear his head. The guards barked at him, and the woman beside him said coldly that running was useless because they had direct orders to deliver him to the Viscount. Hanging in the air, Axe said he had already met the Viscount and resolved everything, but the guards remained firm and kept him suspended. Behind a slightly open door, a maid watched what was happening. When she heard the guards ignore the man's explanations, she stepped forward. Emerging from the shadows, the girl introduced herself and turned to the guards to ask if their captive was really the owner of the inn. Puzzled by what was happening, the maid still greeted Axe as an honored guest, and he said he had simply returned to his room. X was deeply upset that even the simple trip to his own room had become a real ordeal. Rai bowed her head and urged the guards to believe the man's honesty, insisting he could not have done anything wrong. Carefully choosing his words, he tried to confirm what the girl had said, but his speech, broken by long pauses, was lost in the air and never reached the guards. Tears filled the young man's eyes as he said in despair that he no longer wanted to work. The guards were utterly baffled. They could not believe their search was prompted by a simple refusal to work. Confused guards stepped aside to discuss the situation. X, wiping away tears, stood next to Rai, who remained in the doorway, ready to protect her master. Wiping away his last tear, he looked at the guards, hopeful the incident was over and he would finally be allowed into the hotel. The guards stayed firm despite his explanations, saying it was just their job. The guards grabbed his arm, and the hero fought desperately to break free, shouting that it was not his concern. At the peak of tension, a thin chain slid out of the pocket of its clothes. A metal object slipped from his pocket and rolled across the wooden floor of the second floor with a soft ring, drawing everyone's attention. A guard stooped, picked up the metal from the ground and studied it closely. The guards, visibly puzzled, pressed him about the metal's origin. The protagonist asked for the precious symbol back, saying Quina herself had given it to him. Holding the metal, the guard studied the engraving bearing the name X carefully for a long time. After checking every detail, he became convinced the sacred symbol was genuine and conferred high status and immunity. The lawman, thoughtful, began fitting all the pieces of the puzzle together, his gaze becoming more attentive and respectful. At that moment, the guards realized their mistake, dropped to their knees, bowed deeply, and began apologizing for their behavior. The protagonist was surprised by the sudden change in the guard's attitude. The guardian of order returned the medal to its owner, now trusting him completely, and explained that the Viscount's order was dictated solely by selfish motives and did not take his true status into account. Stunned by what was happening, the boy stuttered with excitement, confirmed what the guard said, and carefully took his medal back. Inwardly, he thanked Queen Amin for the medal she had given him, since it had saved him from an unfair accusation. Realizing their mistake, the defenders of the law quickly left the hotel, apologized, and assured the adventurer they could now return home safely. The heavy hotel door closed with a loud bang, as if cutting off the past day's troubles from the room's cozy silence. The protagonist, not hiding his happiness, spread his arms wide and savored the moment of return, while Rai stood behind him, smiling and watching his genuine happiness. Nita unexpectedly spotted them and, surprised, stepped out from around the corner to see what was happening. Nitra thought the best way to escape was through the window. X calmed him and assured him everything would be all right now. Taking the first step forward, the protagonist slowly moved toward the bed, feeling fatigue set in. Every movement was hard, as if an invisible weight had settled on my shoulders. As the trio stood by the front door, X and Rai watched their goal with anticipation. The bed, Nitra, lifted his head and met their gaze with a smile. The round pillow X had wanted so badly lay carelessly on the bed. After a long day of adventure, X gently lifted the edge of the blanket and pushed it a little to the side. At that moment, the hero, still in his clothes, collapsed onto the bed, putting a round pillow under his head, and the maid standing nearby tried to call to him, but it was too late. Falling instantly into a deep sleep, he was left to rest while the heroes, choosing not to disturb him, moved on. A voice sounded unexpectedly in the Viscount's residence. Sitting in a chair, the girl says she needs 120 medium-sized grimoires each day during the winter to make a special one for him. A young man in a suit stands by the door as the two talk. The Viscount feels like he is being ripped off. Pausing for a minute, she concentrates on recalling the very idea that could have changed the course of events. Reaching toward the cylinder, the girl looks as if she is about to act on an idea. She intends to combine wind and fire to create something new and unusual using the element's power. Scoffing, she dismisses the idea that she'd never do such a thing, even if she had thought of it, and pulls the cylinder closer. A rectangular hole in the cylinder reveals something evaporating. She guesses Professor X built the device using elemental magic. As a result, something was obtained. The Viscount struck an important pose, saying his device had received high praise from the princess. In return, he asked for a reduction in the rent for the item and promised to supply her with 30 of them. Startled, the girl waves her hands, signaling him to stop and wait a moment. The Viscount doesn't hear her. Lost in thought, he is pleased by a new idea for lowering the price. He believes ordering in bulk will cut costs. He offers her 120 magic stones for the first rental, and the second rental costs a single stone. Unable to restrain herself, she says she did not say a word about the rental. Asked to explain the words, the butler, who stood calmly with them in the same room, says the stone mentioned serves as fuel for the product. The girl, picking up the butler's thought, finishes the sentence by explaining how to transport the devices. The Viscount needs 3,600 magic stones. Stunned by the huge total, he falls silent and his eyes go blank. Horrified, he screams that he is ruined. His voice cuts through the air filled with despair and bitterness. They try to shout to the Viscount, but the words are lost in the void. Elsewhere, after a dream, the hero wakes up and opens one eye first. Feeling better, he doesn't notice how he fell asleep. At the same time, he stands up and stretches, first reaching with his right hand as he closes his eyes. Peeling his head off the slime pillow, he confirms it is the best. Netra meets her older brother after waking. Behind him, their content little sister Rai rests her hands on his shoulders. X returned their greeting. The protagonist remembers Rai met with Urakar, so he asks if anything happened and she replies that nothing bad happened. They just talked to him. She also says she knows him because he cared for her when she lived in the slums. The protagonist thinks about Urakar and his little sister. He probably didn't want to hurt her since he said he'd take care of her. A brief silence fell over the room. No one spoke. The hero ends the silence by saying he is hungry and wants to go eat shashlik. The others smile broadly, pleased, and head to the kitchen. At the market, among the many food stalls, a contented Nitra is strolling, humming to itself and eating shashlik. Sitting together at a table in the bazaar, the main character says he won't take the kitten's food so he can feel free to eat as much as he wants. Smiling, the hero sits at the table and says he still won't be able to eat as much as the kitten, but he's ready for one shashlik. Voices from people standing away from Atix interrupt this idyll, asking about the forest problems and saying they are only getting worse. Outside a house, 3 men talk about goblins, the forest guards, and fragments of magic stones, saying goblins are growing in number in the forest, they want the guards to do a better job, and there are no fragments. The protagonist hears their words and suspects his protective magic has ended, but he doesn't believe it. At that moment, the hero grabs his head and forces himself loudly to stop thinking about work, drawing the girl's attention. His sister's voice distracts him as she speaks to him. Rai thanks the protagonist for letting them stay and for the kebabs. X just wants to know if they can manage the house. After hearing the story, he realizes the maid has no home and wants to rent a hotel room, so he asks her to reserve it for herself. Ride stands up from the table, startling the hero, and tells him she refuses because she does not want to rely on him so much. Flustered, he explains that he's worried they would be left homeless and unable to leave, and offers his room if they don't mind. A bit sad, she only asked whether she would cause him any inconvenience. The hero reassures them that nothing bad will happen and says they will go home now. Nita and the protagonist begin to drift apart. Rai steels herself and decides she must be useful. Once at the hotel, the protagonist's room is partitioned. Nitrous offered to share a bed with a girl. A bed with a slime pillow remains in the corner. The maid steps away. She immediately slips under the covers into the main character's bed, surprising him. The protagonist snatches the blanket off the bed, as if he's just had a new thought or suddenly needs to act. The stunned X listens closely to the girl's words, trying to make sense of what he heard. Under the covers, she says she can warm the bed while she sleeps, and then thanks him for letting her stay. At that moment, Nitra turns into a cat and jumps into the bed with his little sister Rai. On the protagonist's bed, they lie warm together. X watches it all, feeling many emotions. Taking a few steps, the protagonist walks confidently across the wooden floor in his boots, his footsteps echoing quietly in the empty room and the dull thuds underlining the moment's importance. Slowly, his hand reaches for the book on the shelf, as if guided by intuition or a long-hidden urge to find answers in this book. The moment is quietly tense and full of anticipation. The main character sits on the edge of the bed where the other characters are lying. X opens the book and begins reading, starting with the 2nd chapter and its section on the concept of magic. The first pages explain how it uses magical elements and leads to absurd results. This refers to beings not affected by it, such as animals, and to basic magic. This is the limit for a powerless commoner. The heroes only care about what kind of emotionless statement it is. The hero reads Chapter 2, Section 12, which warns mages not to fall so easily into the void's trap. The boys fall asleep because the book is boring. The hero glances aside, as if noticing something unexpected or straining to catch the faintest sound. X closes the book slowly, as if he had just made an important discovery or reached a decisive conclusion. The hero wants to sleep and walks away with his head down. The boys lie on the bed holding each other under a blanket, with the slime pillow left in the far corner of the bed. An administrator steps into the corridor and spots the hero. An administrator stands behind the counter and X stands in front of him. The administrator asks the hero if he wants to go somewhere, and the hero says he wants to rent another room. The hotel is fully occupied, but he offers the attic as an option, and a mustached man hands over a key which the protagonist accepts. Cautiously, he climbs the creaky stairs to the attic. The attic looked dirty and dusty, but he liked it. It was cheaper than the others, so he got used to taking care of it. In the attic, there is a bed, a table, and a dusty bottle. Concentrating, the hero gathers energy inside himself and casts a spell. 1 second later, the attic looks spotless, as if all the dust and darkness had vanished, leaving only light and openness. X reaches for his robe and starts to unbutton it. He lies on the bed with his arms outstretched. Only his legs remain bent at the knees, touching the floor. He lies on his clothes, and the book remains near her hand. The protagonist kept his eyes open, forgot what Rai said, and told her something he shouldn't have, hoping she won't remember it. The book's chapters flashed before him. It said beastmen had strong physical abilities. Nobles with magical talents were more prone to illness, though the gifted could cope with the void. A girl reads a book with little X sitting in front of her, and she says the old man wrote the book out of envy and prejudice. Lying on the bed, the protagonist smiles and realizes how much has changed. Since his mistress picked him up, he has learned a lot. He can't leave Ryan Nito alone. His words break off. The protagonist lies with his eyes closed, lost in thought and at rest. X is already under a blanket, watching a falling star through the window. He says tomorrow is a new life, and he needs to go to bed early. X lay motionless on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Deep down, he knew there was no point in spending money on rented accommodation anymore. X, Rai, and Nitra rushed forward together, full of shared excitement. Kitten, as always, was far ahead. A young female manager at a prestigious real estate agency met them and asked how she could help the visitors. X spoke enthusiastically about his recent win and said he was eager to buy his own home. Life felt like a string of amazing adventures, and buying a house was one of them, so he planned to use the gold coins the wise master Amin had given him. The female manager asked politely about the budget, and X proudly said he had 5 gold coins. A small smile crossed her face at the unusual answer. The budget proposal was clearly outside her usual experience working with clients. She looked at the young man carefully, realizing that with such a limited budget, finding a place to live would not be easy. But X, with a satisfied look, assured her there were no special requirements. Tilting his head slightly and still smiling, he pictured how his magic could transform any home. Dressed in a formal business suit, the administrator told the visitors she was ready to show them the best house options. Her graceful, perfectly manicured hand pointed to an unusual building that proudly bore the name Rock House. The young people looked at the house's facade with real curiosity, wondering how a rock ended up in its name. The administrator warmly opened the large front door and gestured for visitors to step across the threshold into the unusual house. Stepping over the threshold, they stood stunned by the remarkable interior. Their shock grew when one of them involuntarily opened his mouth, then quickly covered it with his hand to hide his astonishment. They looked up and finally saw what had seemed so amazing, and the ceiling vaults really did resemble natural rock. They were told they were looking at a unique design project inspired by natural rock formations, and when they heard the bedroom was on the 3rd floor, one visitor doubted how convenient that would be. After a thorough inspection, he decided the unusual house did not match his idea of a perfect home. It was not the height that bothered him, but the concept, which seemed too extravagant. Next on their inspection were the city's slums, neglected, cramped quarters, with a very different atmosphere and a distinctly different kind of housing compared to the well-appointed homes. Gesturing broadly, the administrator invited them to follow her toward an unremarkable building that looked more like an abandoned warehouse than a residence. Before them stood ruins rather than a living space, with collapsed walls, broken bricks, and no roof, creating a grim scene of abandonment. Seeing the visitors' confusion, she explained that the house used an open-plan layout, which led to more questions. At that moment, their little companion, alert to outside sounds, pricked up his ears and flattened them against his head as if bracing for danger. Stepping forward boldly, he rushed in front of his master, ready for a possible attack, and his fur stood on end while his tail fluffed up with tension. He reacted instantly, catching the flying stone in his hand and showing remarkable dexterity and speed. Concerned for his friend's safety, the owner hurried to see if he was hurt catching the dangerous projectile. 3 locals suddenly emerged from behind the ruins, were mistaken for invaders, shouted angrily while waving sticks, and demanded that the area be abandoned immediately. The visitors hurried to clear up the misunderstanding, quickly explaining they were just looking at the house and meant no harm. And one of them sounded slightly nervous as they tried to be convincing. After learning the real cause of the conflict, one of the heroes felt genuine regret and embarrassment about what had happened. After talking with local residents, it became clear that the house could have been habitable if not for the missing roof, which local children were now using for games and entertainment. They realized this option was not suitable and asked to see other available properties to find a better one. After a moment's thought, the administrator, frowning and biting her lower lip, admitted the proposed house was slightly over their budget, but she had another option to show. The next inspection point was a cozy nook, A cozy, tidy kitchen greeted them. She led them inside and described the layout in detail, noting 3 rooms, a spacious kitchen, a living room, and that it was close to a market where they could buy everything they needed for a comfortable life. The young man was captivated by what he saw and pictured how he could transform this place. However, doubts began to torment him about whether he could buy a house and manage on his own without a permanent job. Seeing his worry, the administrator approached him with genuine concern and gently asked what was troubling him. She held 3 candies in her outstretched hand, a small symbol of hope and support, and a quiet sign of friendship and warmth. Deep in thought, the young man tried to decide if his heart truly wanted this house, or if it was a passing infatuation. Dressed oddly in a small hat and cloak, he weighed a major decision: buying a house and taking on the hard work it would require. A small smile crossed his lips. Maybe it was no longer about the house, but about a single piece of candy. After trying the treat, he felt a clear pleasure at its surprisingly pleasant taste, which instantly warmed his soul and dispelled the last doubts that had tormented his heart. His sincere, slightly embarrassed smile made him especially attractive as he admitted that perhaps at this special moment in his life he really needed this house. Despite his natural indecisiveness and shyness, he approached the administrator politely and a little hesitantly, asking for a little more time for an extremely important conversation. Startled by his sudden remark, she replied to his request with genuine surprise, while he, feeling very awkward under her steady, scrutinizing gaze, dropped his eyes in embarrassment. His gaze clearly revealed the deepest wish of his life, and he was finally ready to say it after overcoming his fears and doubts. He drew a deep breath of fresh air, steadying himself as if about to take the most important leap of his life. With his head held high, showing both determination and a touch of uncertainty, he announced his intention to buy a house. The news of the purchase filled the administrator with genuine joy, and he thanked the future owner with all his heart for his decision. As they casually walked to sign the fateful agreement, the little furry companion, clearly bewildered by what was happening, only meowed in confusion. In the real estate agency's spacious lobby, the ex and the administrator chatted excitedly as the woman, beaming, warmly congratulated the young man on his choice of housing. His eyes snapped to the far corner of the room as if pulled by a magnet. A figure was moving there. The young man froze, unable to look away. A young girl sat in a richly furnished room decorated with tapestries and antique furniture. Wearing an elegant crown set with precious stones, the girl rose gracefully from her seat and announced he was the one they had been waiting for. Without thinking, he waved to the stranger as if to an old friend. At that moment, the administrator went pale and said the woman before them was Princess Lula, who had gone white. Though shocked by the news, the young man kept smiling at the girl as if he were greeting an old friend. When the princess rose from her seat, the young man finally realized the woman before him was no ordinary girl but a true ruler. Clutching his head, he silently berated himself for his lack of foresight, seeing how foolish he must look to the princess and realizing he was a fool. She watched his reaction calmly, and her loyal servant politely offered her his hand. The young man then saw how gracefully she accepted it. Overwhelmed by emotion and confusion about what was happening, he began to scream, surprising everyone. The princess admitted she had looked into his past, and her voice held genuine sadness as she shared what she had found. Bowing deeply, she apologized and stunned everyone there, her graceful, dignified movement leaving them holding their breath. X could hardly believe his eyes when the princess herself bowed before him and asked for forgiveness. Nearby, the butler fixed the young man with a furious, penetrating stare, making his displeasure obvious. Summoning his courage, the young man objected to the princess, insisting it was not proper for her to humiliate herself like that in front of him. She met his words with a calm, piercing gaze and gently reassured him that he didn't need to worry. The butler, unable to hide his disappointment, turned away from the princess, clearly disapproving of her behavior. X, stumbling with excitement, thanked her for the kind words and quickly assured her that everything was fine. Genuinely bewildered, the princess looked at him, trying to understand why he was confused. Smiling warmly, the young man thanked her for not holding a grudge against him. The girl kept looking at him with a mysterious smile as if she was about to reveal a secret. Feeling awkward under the gaze of those around him, X admitted he was in a difficult situation and did not know how to approach the girl. Taken aback by the question, a clear look of surprise crossed her face. The princess paused, searching for the words to an answer that seemed obvious only to her. She moved closer and took the boy's hand, touching it lightly but firmly. Lula said he could call her his friend. At that moment, the princess turned to her faithful servant and said in a commanding tone that the time had come to announce our decision. Opening his speech with an air of importance, he chose his words carefully. The butler announced that, as a sign of deepest gratitude for his services, both His Majesty and he wished to present the young man with a house of his choice. So flattered by the attention, the young man could barely speak. In a stumbling, slightly emotional voice, he muttered that the gift was far too generous and that he did not deserve such an honor. When asked about his housing preferences, the young man modestly replied that any inexpensive place would do, as long as it was cozy and made him happy. The princess and her retinue announced they had the perfect option, and with a bright smile, she said they had found a magnificent home for him that would cost only 1 coin. X smiled broadly as he looked at them. Everything felt like an incredible dream he could hardly believe. His feet seemed rooted to the patterned floor tiles as a new chapter in his life opened before him. Before them stood a mansion that was actually a palace. The princess gestured elegantly toward the magnificent building and gave the young man a playful wink, sharing his genuine delight. X-Ray and Nitrous stood side by side, unable to take their eyes off their new home, and felt the future that had seemed so vague suddenly take on a clear shape as the majestic mansion became theirs. Walking up the mansion's majestic stone steps, X was surprised and figured such a luxurious house could not be cheap. After telling the house's story, the princess smiled and giggled softly as she imagined every detail. Lula said the house was sold for 1 coin, realizing that if this was the only flaw, he was entirely unworthy of such a beautiful house. In need of advice, he turned inward to the void. His faithful companion he knew would appear at the most unexpected moments. Right then, a small void opened beneath X's cloak. X froze for a moment, stunned by the sight, and his heart began to beat faster as the void, like a small spirit, became increasingly clear. Emptiness took a few unsteady steps on his tiny legs and landed on the ground, looking incredibly cute and harmless. The guards spotted the strange creature, grew wary, and surrounded the group, loudly stating their duty to protect the princess. Rai and Nitra, behind the guards, tried to calm them, reassuring them the small void would not harm anyone. X realized the babies had become so solid that everyone could see him and felt deeply upset, knowing it signaled their magical bond was strengthening and could bring serious consequences. He and the void exchanged long, meaningful looks. Alarmed, the hero realized he had reached the 3rd stage of magic. The baby grew stronger, and the creature looked at him with big, gentle eyes, trying to share its feelings without words. He knew that if the creature fully took over his body and materialized, he could become either a demon king, a devil, or a hermit. The future of those people was unknown because they had been forced to leave the settlement. No one knew what awaited them, and this uncertainty frightened X as much as the possible transformations. The butler, keeping a serious expression and standing fully upright, asked to see the baby. Sin Void exchanges looks of concern and determination. The butler wasted no time and pulled out a strange wish-reading device that looked like an old camera. The hero stared at the butler in confusion as a slip of paper with a wish emerged from the machine. After reading the note, the butler kept a serious expression as he tried to understand what the demons wanted. Watching the scene, the princess first frowned in confusion, her thin eyebrows drawing together at the bridge of her nose, and then she couldn't hold back a smile. Her laughter rang across the courtyard like a bell, making everyone turn toward her. Lula wiped away the tears from laughing, finding what the note said incredibly funny. Embarrassed by the princess's reaction, the butler bowed his head and humbly asked forgiveness, as if he had caused her merriment. Relieved, X realized at last that everything had worked out and allowed himself a quiet smile. He looked at the little void standing with his arms crossed over his chest, wearing an expression of deep sadness. Smiling at his companion, he gave his consent, decisively confirming their intention. Emptiness heard the words and immediately brightened, then ran and jumped with joy, celebrating their new victory. Turning to Ryan Nitra, X invited them to look around inside the house, which made his friends genuinely happy. As the friends climbed the stairs, the princess and the butler approached X and offered to help if needed. Gratefully accepting their offer, he watched the girl and the butler get ready to leave. The girl, saying goodbye, expressed a gentle hope to meet again soon. Once they were in this carriage, the princess thanked Axe gently once more for everything he had done for them, and he stood on the porch, waving after them for a long time as he tried to hold on to every moment of their farewell. The carriage moved slowly down the road, carrying the princess and the butler farther and farther from the majestic mansion. Comfortably settled on the carriage's soft cushions, the princess could not take her eyes off the butler. The butler, sitting across from her, watches the princess closely. Unable to bear the long silence, the butler gently asked the princess if she could remember anything funny. The princess, clearly pleased, told him why she was so happy. The mysterious note he had read revealed the demon's simplest wish, that he wanted a home of his own. Her voice breaking with emotion, the girl begged the master to hire her as a proper maid. Smiling softly, he reassured her that everything was working out for the best. The heroine said the new mansion was very spacious and told the gentleman she was ready to help with the cleaning, stressing the house's impressive size. He looked thoughtful, remembering he had originally searched for a house just for the three of them to live in, hoping it would make her happy and ease her anxiety, but it had not. The girl stood before him with her palms folded in prayer while he was lost in thought, and the idea that she should stay and take on the household duties seemed acceptable to him. Joy spread across her face when he agreed. The girl was bouncing with joy, filled with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, her master calmly continued speaking, watching her stormy display of emotion with a slight smile. X continued speaking, threw a handful of coins in front of her and assured her it would be enough for several years, and she froze in amazement at the generous gesture while he asked her to buy some groceries. The girl was speechless when she saw the gold coin, and the owner noticed her reaction and asked what salary she wanted, but she firmly said she did not need money for her work. The owner smiled warmly, wagged a finger at her playfully, and said that if she ever needed anything, she should definitely contact him. She answered him with a light, slightly mysterious smile. He immediately realized from her look that she would rarely turn to him for help, even if she suddenly needed it. The hero declared the matter finished and looked into the distance, wondering where Nitra and Void had gone. Suddenly, he thought he heard their voices in the distance. He opened the door and found the missing people absorbed in something so interesting they didn't even notice him calling, still watching it with curiosity. The hero realized they had gathered in the kitchen, studying his creation, an endless water jug, with keen interest, and were so absorbed they did not notice him enter. The kitchen hummed with activity. The boy suddenly realized that maybe Void had used his magic. As if hearing his thoughts, Void turned and gave him a joyful, proud look, clearly pleased with his magic. Emptiness rushed toward the heroes, joyful and shouting for them to praise him as fast and loud as he could. X knelt before little Void and, sincerely grateful, told him he was adorable. The little one beamed with happiness. The maid gently stroked the baby's head and, with a kind smile, said he was very good. The child burst into joyful giggles. While Void soaked up the attention and truly enjoyed the compliments, X watched him with concern, thinking how important it was to keep all that praise from going to the little boy's head. Clapping his hands loudly to get attention, he said in a firm voice that it was time to finish moving. The character sternly ordered the little Void to return and strictly forbade him from going outside, surprising him and darkening his face immediately. The hero spread his arms wide as the Void awkwardly crawled under his large cloak, then gently apologized to the little boy and smiled, saying they would have time to play later. X said they needed a futon. Rai heard this and replied confidently that they didn't need to worry because she knew exactly where to buy one and could take him there right now. At last they reached the right place, and the heroes were filled with joy. The client stood in the middle of the showroom and said he didn't know how to choose, and the consultant beside him suggested he try each model to see how comfortable they were. He lay on the bed, pulled the blanket over himself, and was pleased to find the footer light and pleasant to the touch. X admired the futon and called it perfect, which thrilled Rai, but Rai's mood darkened when she saw the price was well over her budget. Taking a deep breath, she strongly advised the client to try other futons on display to see how comfortable they are before deciding. The young man took the futon, looked at Rai, and after a short pause agreed to her proposal, saying he would do it. After reviewing all the futons, they concluded the selection process was tedious. With a sincere smile, the hero thanked Nitra and offered to help carry the belongings and the chosen futon, showing he wanted to be useful. After checking the whole house, The protagonist said he was exhausted, and at that moment the void flew from his cape, and he said it was time to start the game. Forced to decline an invitation to join the game, the hero explained he needed to set aside all entertainment. The other player, clearly upset, took offense and said he would play alone. By now the moon was shining outside, and inside the house emptiness kept the lights on. He moved slowly through the house. Occasionally he formed balls of wind that hovered in the air, casting strange shadows on the walls. With a wave of his hand, a glittering ball of ice formed in the air as the magic followed his motion and shaped a clear, glass-like orb. Continuing his spell, his face glowed with joy as the words about being called delightful kept returning to him. Emptiness approached the wall where the paintings hung, took one down, turned it over in his hands, and studied it closely from every side. Emptiness remained calm and confident, with not a trace of excitement. A sudden tap on her shoulder woke the sleeping Rai, who snapped awake to meet Nita's gaze and, realizing who had disturbed her, looked around. A mysterious smile lit his face as he urged her to look right away at what was happening, because something incredible had happened. His voice hinted at something, building anticipation and sparking curiosity. Rai was still not fully awake, her sleepy eyes half closed under heavy eyelids. Nitra slowly turned the doorknob, and the door creaked open. The girl stood frozen, eyes wide with amazement, her breath caught in her throat. She froze in the doorway, covering her mouth with her hand, stunned. Ray stood in silence, wondering why the paintings floated unsupported, feeling both bewildered and admiring. Nitra, like a seasoned acrobat, leaped lightly into the air and landed on the floating painting with a mischievous smile, then announced it was Ray's turn to join him on the aerial journey. Screaming in horror, she watched her friend jump recklessly from one floating painting to another. Nitra balanced on the edge of one of the paintings and spun complex pirouettes, making Rai shut her eyes in horror and beg him to be careful. At first she protested loudly, shouting that they shouldn't do this and that it was pure madness. Gradually, her screams turned into laughter and a genuine smile spread across her face. Slowly the girl's fear eased, giving way to curiosity and a wish to join the young man in this unusual entertainment. In that moment, they noticed a figure who had appeared out of nowhere. Void watched them with a gaze full of mystery and curiosity, as if witnessing something unusual. Seeing the mysterious figure, Nitra assumed it was the hand of the Void that had created this magical space of floating paintings, and the kid stood there with a mysterious smile. Rai said to the little boy in a warm voice that he was very good and wonderful. The hero agreed that their mysterious friend was really cool, and Emptiness heard this and began to smile. Still smiling, the hero took a ripe apple from his pocket. The girl saw his gesture, stroked the kitten, and thanked him for being such a good boy, filling the air with warmth. Rai walked cheerfully around the house with her friends, her face glowing with joy, then paused, held a ripe apple in her hands, and offered it to the master as a sign of thanks. Rai pulled a shiny object from her pocket, turned it over in her hands, and without looking away from it began to speak. She pulled a small, shiny knife from her pocket, turned it in her hands, and said it would be more convenient to cut the apple into slices because it would be easier to eat. Rai, peeling an apple, said everyone would have to change clothes when she finished. The kitten turned noticeably pale and waved her away in irritation. The gentleman slept deeply, sprawled across the wide bed and taking up almost all the space. The knock on the door shattered the room's silence and echoed off the walls, and though it was as unexpected as thunder on a clear day, the gentleman, deep in sleep, continued to snore. A kitten and a girl came through the door carrying a tray of breakfast for the sleeping gentleman. Rai, holding the delicious food, wished him good morning and nitrograded the axe. Rai carefully lifted the lid off the tray, and the owner froze in admiration at the apple cut into thin slices on the tray. X smiled at the beautifully decorated apple, genuinely admiring the chef's skill and noting how sweet and touching it was. Smiling broadly, he thanked everyone present with genuine gratitude for the pleasant surprise. The hero happily tasted each apple slice, enjoying its flavor, while everyone around him smiled and said the little helper had tried his best to help prepare the treat. X bowed his head slightly and smiled warmly, then thanked Rai sincerely, told her she was doing a great job, and said he appreciated her contributions. The girl was so embarrassed she couldn't look away, staring at him without blinking as if entranced, afraid to miss any small movement or change in his face. The girl cried out in delight, her face lighting up with a wide, emotional smile, then vowed to keep working hard, putting all her strength and energy into her work. The heroine settled into a cozy corner, holding a cup of tea and a plate of cookies. Breaking off small pieces of the treat with slow, deliberate movements, she brought them to her mouth. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she tucked her legs under her, ate the cookie mechanically, and barely tasted it, her thoughts fixed on X, picturing what he was doing now. Suddenly, the eyes of the stuffed rabbit she was petting mechanically began to glow with a soft light. Little X, pale and thin, sat on the cold floor and carefully held a piece of bread in his hands, his eyes showing a weariness beyond his years, though he had only just turned 10. In the background, a black-haired man looked lost in thought, as if trying to grasp something important. Then he suddenly announced they had maple crabs today for the first time in a long time. The familiar voice made X turn sharply, and memories of the past flashed before his eyes. When his parents were taken by bandits, his aunt and uncle took him in. Sitting by the fire, the uncle turned sharply toward X, frowned, and rudely asked what he was staring at, calling him a brat. But the aunt standing nearby gently put her husband in his place, and the hero was grateful to them. An extraordinary silence hung everywhere, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional song of birds. X sat on an old log, staring where the sky met the forest, unable to stop thinking about how he could help these people. A deep sigh escaped him, and he felt obliged to act. Suddenly his gaze froze as if he had seen something odd, his eyes and eyebrows lifting slightly as a thought flashed through his mind that could change everything he believed was happening. Two figures appeared before him, talking animatedly. They were discussing maple crabs, creatures Axe had sometimes not heard of before. Their voices came from far away. One man, frowning, asked whether the forest where the crabs live was really that dangerous, because he had heard stories of people dying there. The other man waved his hand and said it wasn't true. The stranger's words lingered with the hero, bringing to mind his uncle's warning that nothing grows well in this forest, and that it seems to drain the life from everything. A voice called out to the boy and broke the silence, making him jump and turn sharply, his heart racing with fear and anxiety. Flustered, he asked the strangers what they wanted. They offered to join him on the crab hunt, but warned him not to tell anyone. The offer was tempting. The young man pictured the mysterious maple crabs, imagined what they looked like, and suddenly remembered they were his uncle's favorite delicacy. Strange images formed in his mind, and he became increasingly absorbed by thoughts of crabs. His uncle always said he had never tasted anything better, and now the boy had a chance to please him. He gathered his courage and accepted the stranger's offer. They walked confidently, and the outline of the red forest was already visible ahead. The boy lifted his head and admired the strange sight. The leaves on the trees glowed with bright colors. He realized with wonder that they had already arrived in this mysterious red forest. Carefully plucking a leaf, he held it to his eyes and saw it was shaped like a hand, as if nature itself had made the likeness. His companions were visibly nervous, their faces pale with fear. This forest truly affected people, stirring a deep, hard-to-explain anxiety. One of the men couldn't stand the tension and said impatiently how much farther he had to go to reach the crabs, complaining that the ground was squelching and hard to walk on. Feeling more confident than the others, the boy stepped forward, pointed at the strange sight, and said the very crabs they had been looking for were there. His finger pointed at the small maple crabs scurrying across the ground like busy workers on an important task. Their quick, coordinated movements brought the scene to life. The young man sank to his knees, eyes wide with amazement. The heroes were clearly trying to gather as many crabs as they could. Anticipation hung in the air. Taking a crab in his hands, X gently stroked its shell, thinking that with so much prey around he might get something too. The boys talked excitedly about catching crabs, their faces lit with joy and anticipation. They scurried between the trees, deftly catching the crabs that tried to escape. The hunt started successfully. Suddenly, one of them jerked his hand back, shouted in surprise, and asked what was happening, and his reaction alerted the others so they all froze, listening to the strange sounds around them. Trembling with fear, one of the boys turned and muttered that these were unusually noisy flies he had never seen before. Genuine horror and fear filled his eyes when he raised his head and saw something that made his heart race. His face went pale, and his lips were dry with excitement. It was a huge swarm of insects. X, still holding the crab, was baffled and watched his companions panic, shouting that these were dangerous spiny reapers, predatory insects linked to terrible legends. The men ran off in terror, leaving the hero sitting frozen and bewildered, still unable to understand what was happening or why everyone was so frightened. Lost in thought, the young man looked down but kept his eyes on the huge swarm of insects above his head. Realizing something was wrong, he looked up and froze in amazement. The sight made his heart skip a beat. He stared at the dark silhouettes swirling in the air and remembered with horror the stories of the prickly reapers, dangerous insects whose bite could cause unbearable pain. A strange figure appeared out of nowhere and caught his attention, long hair fluttering in the wind and casting a mysterious glow around the figure's head. A sharp roar like a clap of thunder split the silence. The deafening blast made the ground shake. The frightened young man instinctively covered his head with his hands to protect himself. The young man lowered his hands slowly, his eyes widening at the sight of the stranger whose long blonde hair fluttered in the wind, and he realized she was the mysterious figure who had somehow saved him. A mysterious figure wrapped in clothes, long hair fluttering in the wind, stood motionless with its back to the young man and said nothing, its slender silhouette almost unreal in the semi-darkness. The stranger turned to the young man, gave a calm, searching look, and asked with sympathy if he was hurt, her eyes showing genuine concern. The young man could not tear his eyes away from her. Captivated by her beauty, he admitted he had never seen anyone so beautiful. Enchanted by her, he couldn't stop staring, and her unearthly beauty made his hair stand on end and his head buzz. To show deep gratitude, the young man dropped to one knee, bowed his head, and thanked his savior for appearing at that exact moment. Still on his knees, he slowly raised his head and kept looking at her. Seeing him like that, the stranger leaned closer, her voice soft with concern as she said his legs felt weak with excitement and told him not to overexert himself. Pausing for a moment, she looked thoughtfully at the young man and said he might be an uncut diamond whose true value had not yet been revealed. Supporting her chin with her graceful hand, she studied his actions with a keen gaze, as if trying to read his soul and uncover his hidden thoughts and feelings. Still seated, the young man stared at her in bewilderment, unaware of what was happening, and the stranger said she sensed a magical gift in him that might even be greater than her own. She figured he had a fairly weak constitution, a common trait among those with very high magical abilities. The young man lowered his eyes and blushed, confirming her guess that he was often sick and had never been very healthy. Tilting her head thoughtfully, she listened closely to his story without interrupting. After a brief pause while she studied his face, the stranger stepped closer and gently hinted that if he didn't mind, she had an interesting proposition for him. The young man looked at her. Leaning toward him, she gently asked whether he would move in with her. Smiling slightly, she said she wanted to help him unlock his power and asked him to be her apprentice. Listening intently, the young man kept looking at her, took in every word, felt his heart quicken, and thousands of thoughts swirled in his head. The stranger gave him a faint smile as if she already knew he would agree, and her lips trembled with barely contained excitement. Still sitting there, he clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, and something about that sentence left him vaguely uneasy. Determined, he took her hand and, trembling, asked her to guide him through magic to reach the necessary stages of development. The first time he said the word, he bowed and called her teacher with deep respect. She answered with a warm, sincere smile that showed approval of his choice. The stranger gently took his hand and said that in that case, she would wait for him at her place. Then she asked him with concern if his family was all right. The young man stared at her in open surprise, asked whether this was really happening, and wondered if leaving the family might make his uncle and aunt happier. Confidently, she led him, told him it was time to go, and the hopeful young man followed obediently. Something stopped him abruptly, and he clenched his fists until his knuckles went white and took a deep breath. When he stopped, she turned and looked surprised. Gathering his courage, he asked her for a little time. The tired man climbed the steps slowly and paused at the doorway. He took a deep breath and announced he was back. It was Uncle Axe, worn out from a long day and heavy thoughts. He stepped into the house and was surprised to find the room empty. The silence felt unnatural, and the lack of familiar sounds was unsettling. He had expected to see someone from the household, but the house seemed deserted. He looked around and automatically glanced toward the kitchen where someone usually was, his gaze lingering on that spot as he thoughtfully lowered the heavy bag from his shoulder. Approaching the table, he saw a plate of crab. It felt odd because they'd eaten crab yesterday, and he was sure none was left, but this looked freshly cooked. A small note beside the plate caught his eye. He opened it and read a short, heartfelt thank you to them for everything. It was a message from Axe. Scattered across the tree's mighty branches, a variety of houses could be seen. At last they reached their destination. The stranger pointed to a house and proudly said it was her home. The young man could not hide his amazement. He had not expected such a large settlement. Touching the door handle lightly, she opened the door and motioned the young man inside. She looked closely at her guest and gently said he needed to freshen up after the long journey. Gracefully, she set the steaming bowl before him, the rising steam giving the room a cozy feel and filling it with the dish's rich aroma. Overwhelmed by an enticing aroma that made his head spin, the young man inhaled deeply and admitted he had never encountered such a delicious dish. Gratitude flowed from him endlessly as he thanked them warmly, unable to express all he felt. A gentle smile lit her face as she watched him, making her particularly beautiful. Starting to eat, he noticed the dish's unusual, unmatched flavor. She laughed softly and admitted she'd been experimenting with maple crab extract, a rare delicacy. His genuine surprise and admiration made her smile again. Smiling, he tasted the dish. His face showed he had finally figured out where the amazing flavor came from, and that made the hero feel very good. Tears of joy filled his eyes, not from bitterness but from overwhelming emotion, and such exquisite food felt incredible to him, almost like a fairy tale gift of fate. Her hospitality had clearly touched him. The young man listened to every word, soaking up the information and trying not to miss a single moment. With her hand on the table, she introduced herself as Alice, a high elf. The words came from nowhere. The boy was so pleased by what the teacher told him that he couldn't stop smiling. From that moment, the boy became Alice's student, and 5 years later, he had learned a great deal, and his life was full of new knowledge and amazing discoveries. A juicy red apple hung on a tree branch like a jewel. Suddenly, an invisible hand cut it, and it arced through the air, landing softly in the outstretched palm. X had already raised the apple to his mouth to take a bite when Alice said sternly that his behavior was unacceptable. Wanting to stop the unpleasant conversation, he cheerfully said he would step out for a short while, still holding the half-eaten apple. Alice watched Axe rise into the air and felt unease, knowing his power was growing far too quickly for his age and experience. Watching his flight closely, she realized she was showing only a small part of her abilities, and behind the seeming carelessness and youthful enthusiasm lay a vast reserve of potential. She stood still, watching the horizon where the sky met the earth. Alice walked down the street, absorbed in thought as she sorted ingredients and planned a new recipe. After the long flight, his legs were tired but strong as they finally touched solid ground. He stood on a huge rock that towered over a deserted wasteland. The place was chosen so he could practice magic away from prying eyes and without interference. Determination in his eyes, the young man said he would start today on his journey to become a magician who would surpass his mentor. The hero knew he had to form a special bond with the void, the source of power. Recalling Alice's lessons, he realized she was teaching him not just to become a magician, but to grasp deeper truths and wisdom. Despite her warnings, he was determined to meet her expectations. Reflecting on his destiny, he felt ready to become a man and to make a deal with the void itself to achieve his goal, his determination unwavering. A horned guide suddenly appeared before him, an ancient intermediary between the human world and the void. The creature studied the young man and asked what he wanted and what he would give in return. X replied without hesitation that he was ready to give absolutely everything, and the man tested him by asking whether he was prepared to give his own life, the most valuable thing. Without hesitation, the young man said yes. His face showed steady determination, and his voice was firm and confident. Fear of the unknown burned inside him, but he kept it hidden, with a steady gaze and a straight back. After studying the young man closely, the horned guide made a suitable proposal. The deal's terms were unexpected. The man demanded extra talent as payment. From that moment, his body's physical development would stop and remain young forever. Despite the gravity of the consequences, X accepted this condition without hesitation.